And there's a little bit of a delay.
Yeah.
Well, greetings and salutations to the 310 tribe, wherever you may be. It's good to see you guys. This was a little bit of an unexpected surprise for me. I felt really led this week to reach out to my brother Aaron, who I'll be bringing on here in a second. Many of you are familiar with Aaron from God a Minute. He's done a ton of videos, and he's always got good content, and he's always a deep thinker. And when it comes to the feast, the holy days, the timing of the Lord's return, and as usual, or not usual, but most of the time, if I'm at home, I have my kids or somebody in the background. So y'all are pretty used to that by now. So hey, say hi, Titus. He was in a spelling bee today. I think he went through what 8 rounds. Yeah. So very proud of him today. This is the second year you've done a spelling bee. All right. Well, you'll nail it next time. The kids that normally win that are usually like the 5th graders, 4th and 5th graders. So.
The second graders won.
Oh wow.
Against 8th graders.
That is crazy. All right. Well, I'm gonna bring brother Aaron on. Here, let's do this. There he is.
Hello.
How are you doing, Aaron?
Good. How about you?
I'm good, man. Yeah, I'm excited about this. I love talking about this topic. And with all the news and stuff that's been happening as of late, I feel like we have not talked about this enough. And we probably need to inject this back into the conversation because Christians get all worked up around the drones and the orbs and all the other crazy stuff going on in the world. We got to recenter ourselves back on the blessed hope and on the return of Jesus. So there's no other person I could think of to go over timing things than with you, because you've done such amazing work in the past, and I love how your mind works as well. So a little bit for my audience, if you want to introduce yourself for those who aren't familiar with you.
Okay. Well, yeah, my name's Aaron. The channel's called God a Minute, and I've been doing what I do for about 4.5 years, the channel, and I used to be, well, I still am. I was a full-time music teacher and musician, but now I'm basically doing full-time YouTube, telling people that Jesus is coming. But in my history of almost 20 years of being a teacher and being a musician, you learn patterns, you learn structure, you learn scales, you learn chords, and so, and there's going to be lots of singing. There's going to be a lot of music in heaven, and so, you know, David played music before the Lord. So there's this component of when I read the Bible, I see patterns because I'm a musician. I see structure. I also just don't read the text. I try and understand the heart of God when I'm reading the Bible as well. And so it's sometimes it's analytical, but sometimes there's a heart thing that helps us understand things. So, but all that being said, I like numbers, I like patterns, and I always explore the general timing of His return, the rapture, and the second coming, and speculate. And I think we're in the season. Absolutely, we've got to be in the season, and that's the basics of it. And so on the channel, I do some music, I do some comedy, but really the root of it is, when is Jesus coming? And I'll say, even just to get as an intro here, I'm going to go one step further than what most people would say. Is I think we will know. I think we'll even probably know the day. I know for a lot of people that makes them feel uncomfortable, but I think that we likely will know the day by the time that it gets here, whatever the day that is. I think that people watching will actually be at least be in a position where, like, okay, it's very possible on this given day, you know. So because there is actually no Bible verse that tells us that we won't know the day. Actually, there's actually more indication that we'll probably at least know the season. But there's no clear verse that tells us that we won't know it. So I am not discouraged by looking for the actual potential day. And I think it's an encouraging thing. And I know lots of people have been wrong in the past, but that doesn't mean that somebody will eventually figure it out. But, you know, more importantly, if Jesus is truly coming in a couple weeks, months, years, whatever, all the more reason to tell people about Christ. and to enter into a relationship with him. So I suppose that's my little intro. And then
Yeah, I like that. I'm always, for a long time I've been a believer that we will know the season. And the more that I've looked at that passage in Matthew 24, that no man knows the day or the hour, that whole chapter, that whole context is about the second coming. So when you take if you take it all in context, right, and it's referring to the second coming, then what you see is that there is put yourself in the first century, right? Put yourself there listening to Jesus there at the Olivet discourse on the Mount of Olives. And rabbit trail side note for me is that when I got to visit Jerusalem years ago, I was with a couple of other guys, two Americans and a Dutch guy. We were all staying in the same hostel, and we all ended up on the Mount of Olives together. And we were sitting on the Mount of Olives, looking over the over on the where the Temple Mount is, and it was it was in the evening. It was in the late evening, so it wasn't like the sun was going down, but it wasn't fully dark or anything like that yet. And none of those guys, I said, dude, do you know how cool this is? And I started telling them about the Olivet discourse, and they had never really heard it before, especially the Dutch guy had never heard it. And so I walked them through, just kind of from memory, the whole Olivet discourse. And I can't explain it, how surreal it felt to be talking to guys that didn't really understand the Olivet discourse, on the Mount of Olives as the sun was setting, as we were looking over, because it's all like tombs. They have all those like concrete tombs and stuff that are sitting on top of the ground there, and they put all the rocks on top of them and stuff. That was probably one of the coolest experiences I've ever had, just being able to do that. But when you take that passage of "No man knows the day or the hour," is talking about the whole event of the second coming, the tribulation, all that. I call that the day of the Lord. We know that the day of the Lord, in terms of, is used both as a specific day. It's also used as a kind of a general time period that's at a minimum 1,007 years long. So it would encompass this whole time. And if you're in the first century listening to Jesus, and he's trying to tell you like, hey, uh, and he's got he's got to know that this is still going to be a ways off. It's going to be beyond their lifetimes, at least, because the church has got to spread out. It's got to go throughout the world and all that. uh this would be something that they would not pursue necessarily in their lifetime, even though I think they held to a belief of imminence. Paul, when he wrote, he included himself in this language, using the words like we and us, and especially in First Thessalonians 5, um, talking about the return of the Lord, the rapture. So, but when you look at other passages like Revelation 3:3, when Jesus is warning the church at Sardis, if you're not going to watch, I'm going to come upon you as a thief, and you're not going to know the hour in which I come, the day or the hour when I come. So there is I feel like there is an expectation that at a very minimum, we should know the season. I mean, basically every Christian that opens and cracks open the Bible and reads it routinely or frequently should have a general understanding of the time frame. And then if you get to like the sons of Issachar, they understood the times. For me, I think that we should try to emulate that in terms of looking into these things and looking into when the Lord's were going to return. And we see, obviously, I'll talk about this in a little bit, Luke chapter 12 and the parable that Jesus gives about the good and faithful servant. Talking about the faithful servant, the good servant is the one that's watching and waiting for the master return. And if we just ignore all that and go about our daily lives and ignore it, pretend like it's never going to happen, and then that day catches us unaware, that I don't want to be in that situation. I do not want to be in that place of being caught not waiting for my master, my Lord Master return. So, all right, I don't want to hog the whole thing because I can talk a lot. So I'm going to frequently, just if you got to jump in, man, just jump in, or do whatever you got to do, and I'll turn my volume down.
I think Pete and I are both ready. We could both talk for a long time, and so we both got to remind
Dangerous.
ourselves to pause after we said something. So I'll do the same thing. I'll try not to hog the mic too. I was able to read your article that you sent me just before we got in here too, and it's just, here's another basic introduction before we get into some really actual details of when we might think Jesus may come and all that. So Luke chapter 10 is talking about the Good Samaritan, and I'll read a little bit about it. Luke 10:30 through 37. Then Jesus answered and said, a certain man went down to Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a certain priest came down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise a Levite, when he arrived at the place, came and looked and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was. And when he saw him, he had compassion. So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. And he set him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. On the next day, when he departed, he took out 2 denarii, this is the main point, and gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I come again, I will repay you. So which of these 3 do you think was neighbor to him who fell among the thieves? And he said, he who showed mercy on him. Then Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. So the awesome thing here is a denarius is worth a day's wage. And so the Samaritan gives him 2 denarii, which is 2 days' wage. But the Bible interprets itself. And if we go and bounce around the Bible, we'll see another passage that says a day is like 1,000 years. And that's in 2 Peter 3, verse 8. I'll read it. But beloved, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord, one day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. So we've got this Samaritan giving 2 days' wages to take care of this person, and he said he's coming back. And so Jesus uses parables to teach things, but also to reveal things to his family, but to hide things from the evil or the wicked. And so Jesus is telling us in this parable essentially that he's coming back in 2,000 years. That's what he's saying. At least that's my perspective. And well, so when did Jesus die on the cross? And my opinion, my perspective is that he died Wednesday, April 25th, 31 AD. And of course, everybody's got their perspective, and I'm sure Pete's got his perspective, and everybody in the chat probably has their perspective, and everybody's usually pretty opinionated on what they think about that. So I really, I understand the arguments. But the reason why I think it's Wednesday, April 25th, 31 AD, is because of the Wednesday. I did 2 videos on this this year. And long story short, I believe that he died on Nisan 14 because that's what the Bible says. That's what he had to do. And the only Nisan 14 that falls on a Wednesday within those given windows of 30 to 33 AD falls on particularly Wednesday, April 25th, 31 AD. In addition to that, there was a blood moon in Jerusalem that night. Now, I'll be honest, it wasn't like a full blood moon according to Stellarium and the other websites, but it was a blood moon that night in Jerusalem at that time. So that's pretty perfect. I've got many other reasons. If we can talk about that, but the basics here is if he died Wednesday, April 25th, 31 AD, and we use the Hosea 6:2 prophecy, what I do personally is I look at that as a potential 2001 year from the cross, because it says after 2 days I will revive you. And on the 3rd day, okay, now we're dealing with another time thing here, right? So after 2 days and on the 3rd day. And so I look at that as a potentially 2001 year timeline. So if 31 AD is truly the year, then I'm really strongly looking at 2032. Now I've got like as a second coming, minus 7 years, 2025 potential rapture year. So I'm really, really strongly looking with honesty at a window of 2025 to 2032 as the tribulation timeline. Absolutely could be wrong. We're all speculating and guessing, but I'll zip my mouth now and invite Pete to say what he's going to say there.
Yeah. Hey, you were pulling up that the Good Samaritan parable. There's the one I also like, the one in John 4 when Jesus was with the Samaritans, and he said in verse 40, this is John 4:40, he says, Let me go to 39. And many of the Samaritans of that city believed in him because of the word of the woman who testified. He told me all that I ever did. So when the Samaritans had come to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days. And we see that 2 days or on the third day, we see that all over the place, even going back to Abraham, when Abraham was taking Isaac up to the mountain was it Moriah, where he was going to sacrifice him on there. And you see that all the time. And every time you see that the 2 days or on the third day, whether it's the cross or it's, all of that, it seems like it's foreshadowing. It seems like a timestamp almost, if you will. I know it's talking about time, but it's that specific phrasing of the after 2 days or on the third day. There's something significant to that because we see it repeated over and over and over. And what you alluded to was something that Tyler and I had done back. Oh my gosh, we did this 2 years ago, and then we did a follow up not too long ago, maybe a month or two ago. But yeah, we were looking at Hosea 2 or Hosea 5:15 through 6, talking about I'm going to return. Let me actually read that because I want to start in verse 15 or verse 5.
Yeah, sure, no
Hosea
problem.
5. Let's find it here. 5:15, Hosea, let's see. And I will return, this is God speaking, I will return again to my place till they acknowledge their offense.
I'll
Then
tell
they
you
will
what.
seek my face.
Let's do one thing. Let's just read the verse before it, because a lot of people don't know this. Verse 14, Ephraim is northern Israel, and Judah is southern Israel. Okay? So why don't we start from verse 14, knowing that Ephraim is northern Israel, and Judah is southern Israel. And so we're talking about Israel here. So go ahead, bro. Start from verse 14.
14, for I will be like a lion to Ephraim, and a young lion to the house of Judah. Even I will tear them and go away. I will take them away, and no one shall rescue. In verse 15, I will return again to my place till they acknowledge their offense, and then they will seek my face. In their affliction, they will earnestly seek me. In chapter 6, come and let us return to the Lord, for he is torn, but he will heal it. He is stricken, but he will bind us up. And after 2 days, he will revive us. And on the third day, he will raise us up, that we may live in his sight. Let us pursue the knowledge of the Lord. His going forth is established as the morning, and is coming, and he will come to us like the rain, like the latter and former rain to the earth. What you got on that?
Another fun thing to add to that is, just because we're talking about the Samaritans, is Samaria was the capital of the northern kingdom. So, when we got these Sumerian parables that we read ahead of time, which I wasn't really even thinking about that, but Samaria was the capital. What's that? Yeah, exactly. So Samaria was the capital of, in other words, the northern kingdom, or Ephraim. And so maybe there's a playoff there. But yeah, it says, after 2 days, he will revive us, and on the third day, he will raise us up. So that's why I'm like, okay, maybe it's 2001 year from the cross. And honestly, I'm not picking 31 AD just because it's the closest one to make it fit and all that. I really am convinced that he would have had to die on a Wednesday, and there's no other date that really is convincing to me. I know that some people that think he died in 32 AD will say that he died on a Wednesday, but they're not. They're using a different calendar that I don't even know what calendar it is. It's a different type of a calendar, but certainly I think this is a prophecy. But this Hosea 6:2 is it's not a rapture verse; it's a second coming verse, because it's talking to Ephraim and Judah, which is northern Israel and southern Israel. And so this is talking about the second coming. If you're a new time rapture watcher, if you've only been watching for a couple of weeks or months, you're really new to salvation. To salvation. Like, okay, when you read this, at first it kind of seems like it could be a rapture verse, but then when you understand it's Ephraim and Judah, that's why I really made a point to explain that, because this really is talking about Israel and the second coming. But that doesn't mean there's no rapture. It just means this is a prophecy for the second coming. Now what we do is we minus 7 years. All right, so where are we at? So. And I think one of the biggest hinge point dates is the cross date. I mean, is there any other bigger event than that? No. So is it reasonable to add 2,000 years to that? Yeah. So that's where we're at,
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's so. I think the challenge these days right now is that it's been nearly 2,000 years, and the biggest problem I see amongst churches in Christendom when it comes to eschatology. I mean, there are a lot of problems. Don't get me wrong with churches, but in terms of eschatology, I think the main issue that I see is that they've gotten into this mindset that Christ isn't ever going to come back, and they get into this like this normalcy bias in their life, and they are doing the same exact they're committing the same exact not sin necessarily, but they're committing the same to the same problems that they had in the first century, because by the time Christ came, the last what they call it, the silent years, was the previous 400 years since the last prophet, and just time had gone on, and they kind of just figured that's the way the world's always going to be, and they were just going to have to, the way they had it set up with the second temple, with the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes, and everything was set in place, man. The Jews, they felt like they were in a good place, at least from the Sanhedrin's perspective. Like they were the authority. They were God's voice on the earth. And people forget. People think that this reality right now, the one you and I live in, is the way it's always going to be. They think that this is like the only reality that exists because it's gone on for so long. But God has told us over and over in scripture, I'm coming back. I'm coming back. I'm coming back. And not only that, we see these patterns emerge like you and I talked about right at the beginning, after the second day, or on the third day, or after 2 days, or on the after 2 days, or on the third day. And when we look at Psalm 94, it talks about, a day is as 1,000 years, both in Psalm 94 and Second Peter was at 3:8. Um, that God doesn't look at time the same way that you and I do, but He still recognizes that there is time that we are under, and He's putting these things into our perspective to let us know, hey, this isn't going to be the way it's always going to be. People live today like the United States, continuing resolutions, taxes, my job, my 401k, geopolitical turmoil, Amazon, Santa Claus, all of the things that we kind of consider, I don't know, normal life, or we consider, just we look around and everything's physical. I can touch this desk, I can go to a job, I can make money, I can buy groceries. That's just how people view reality right now. They think that the way things are right now is the way it's always going to be. And what we're trying to remind folks is that no, it's not. This is not the reality. God did not create all this so that we could live in this kind of fallen, broken system forever. He didn't create this so that America could be great for another 100 years. He's got everything under his time, and he controls the time, and everything seems to everything centers around the nation of Israel prophetically, and the fact that they've been back in their land since 1948, and that they recaptured their city of Jerusalem, unified their city of Jerusalem in 1967, and all the things that have happened. I've done a lot of studies on the going forth, the things that led to the rebirth of Israel from 1897 going forward, all the little timestamps. So Israel didn't come back into her land as a nation again in a vacuum. Things happened in the background that made it possible. World War One, actually going back to Theodore Herzl, in 1897, doing the first Zionist Congress, put it back in the minds of people, and they created their own little constitution. We are going to go back to the land. We're going to go back to the land of our forefathers, of the patriarchs, and we're going to resettle our homeland and reclaim our homeland, because they didn't. They had the foresight to say, "Hey, we can't stay in Europe forever. We can't stay here forever." They were already seeing the signs of the rising anti-Semitism that was happening in places like Spain and England and France and in Germany. And Theodore Herzl, to his credit, was cognizant of enough to recognize those as signs, saying we need to go back to our homeland. We need to go to a country where, that's our own home, that we're not going to be persecuted or thrown into gulags, or kicked out of the land, and we lose all of our possessions, our wealth, and everything. So they begin that. World War I happened. It stripped the Ottoman Empire of basically the Middle East, except for what they have now with Turkey. And all of that land was then redistributed amongst these new countries that were coming up all around the same time. You got to think. I mean, we look at Israel today, and the big argument is that they're occupying the land. They're blah. All of those countries, all of them, all began within 20 years of each other in terms of this, the 20th century. Israel or Egypt, 1922. Saudi Arabia, I think it was 1933 or something, 1932. Jordan, Syria, all of those were within like 20 years. So they are all released back to become their own countries again in the 20th century, which when you go to Luke 21 in the Olivet discourse, and it uses the in the parable of the fig tree and all the trees. Well, when you go back to Judges 9 in the parable of the trees, the trees are used as nations. They're representing nations in this parable. So I don't have an issue with it. All of those countries came about around the same time, from 1920 to 1950. All of those countries there that are there now today. So the fact that Israel's back in her land after nearly 2,000 years of being in diaspora, again, we know we're in the season. We know it's close, and now it's been what, since 1948? It's been, do the math on my fingers and toes, but probably what, 70 something years, 75 years.
Well,
So go ahead.
yeah. Well, that would bring me to I guess the next thing. Well, I've got so many pieces of paper I could present, but why don't I just start off with like maybe 4? I'll turn my camera away in a non-professional way, and I'll hold the piece of paper here and show you my chart, and then we'll try and get it to a place where it's not so blurry. And let's see if it'll zoom in here. There we go. Okay, we'll try my best here to keep my hand still. And I don't know if you're able to make my screen a little bigger for everybody so they can see it a bit better. There you go. Oh, that's not it. But yeah, you get the right idea, I think.
I'm trying to find the right configuration here that makes.
Yeah, I know.
This is challenging. Yeah, that's good right there. I mean,
okay, that's fine.
I'm trying to make myself smaller.
All right. Fiddle around if you want. But anyway, the basic idea here is if 31 AD is the cross date, which I think it is. I don't know. I'm not really going to change my mind unless somebody convinced me that our calendars are off in terms of the Wednesday isn't a Wednesday, or they really mess with their calendars. But I'm pretty convinced now that it's 31 AD. Another reason why I think it's 31 AD is because I believe we should start from the decree given to Ezra. And I think we're the reason why in Daniel 9 he split it up by 7 weeks and then 62 weeks, because I think he wants us to use the decree given to Ezra and the completion of the walls with Nehemiah, the combination of the two. And that adds up to when he showed up at the beginning of his ministry, in my opinion, 31 AD. But anyway, if it's 31 AD, you add the 2001 years, that gets you to 2032 as the potential second coming. There's a little bit more detail with the 1406, but I think I got it in a chart behind it. I can just put that to the side because we were talking about that. Here's like the big thing. This was like the big deal for me this year. I did a video on this a while ago. You can refer to these verses. I don't know if you could see that well. I'll just say it if you want to refer to these, and you could do the math. But it's Genesis 47, Genesis 41, Genesis 45, Genesis 30, Genesis 31. And really what it boils down to is you get the idea where Jacob would have been 84 years old when he married Leah and Rachel. And 1948, well, there you go. You got it. 1948 plus 77 years is 2025. That's when he met Rachel and Leah. And then 1948 plus 84 years, that gets you to 2032. And I believe that when he was 77 years old, which is what he'll be next year, Jacob Israel, that is when he saw Jacob's ladder. And I believe that Jacob's ladder was actually a picture of the rapture. And we could talk about that, but I think this has been a pretty foundational for me. This whole age thing with Jacob's age, Jacob being Israel. It's a time. It's called Jacob's trouble, and we know that Jacob's name was changed to Israel. And sevens are significant as well, right? So 77 plus another 7 years, so that ends up being 77 plus 7, 777. There's stuff there, but I'm just kind of being brief about these these charts. I got two more. I'll just be quick about this one too. Similar idea, but like I said, I think Jacob saw Jacob's ladder at age 77, and I think that relates to 2025. Now, I think Jacob's ladder was actually the DNA of Christ. I think that I know I'm an incredible drawer. My stick man, there's King Jesus, right? But the ladder, I think it was actually a DNA strand, and I think it was actually the blood of Christ that he was seeing, because how else would they have understood what DNA looked like back then? And so they probably would have described it, or writing it in Genesis in no other way than that. So Jesus also says in John 1:51 that you're going to see angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man. I think that was pointing to the rapture. After John 1:51, you get to John chapter 2, and that's the wedding. That's his first miracle, turning water into wine. And that could be a picture of the church as well, and all that. So he turned six stone pots, or however it's called, representing 6,000 years, and that whole idea there. But I'm pretty optimistic about that, and I haven't done a video on this yet, but this is the last one I'll show you, then we can talk about anything. Is that the big thing about this chart is that I think it looks like the evidence lining it up with Assyrian records that David probably died in 969 BC. I used to think 971 BC, but there was some convincing evidence with the Assyrian eclipse when Jonah went to Nineveh to warn Nineveh that there was probably an eclipse in 763 BC on June 15th. Long story short, they were able to backdate the Assyrian records with the biblical chronology and get back to line up that 966 would have been the fourth year of Solomon's temple, and you backdate it with 1 Kings 6:1, and that gets you to, it looks like 969 would have been the time that David died. Well, 969 plus 3,000 years gets you to 2032. And so, I mean, there's more on this chart, but that's a whole lot of info just, thrown at you real quick there. And a fun thing too is the oldest person in the Bible that is Methuselah at age 969. And so what's up with that? Like, why did he die at age 969? And was that a hint to something? I don't know. His name means his death shall bring. So his death shall bring David. David is the covenant. David was given something called the Davidic covenant, that his seed will be the future Messiah. So his death shall bring the future Messiah, perhaps. I don't know. 969. All three numbers are divisible by 3,000 years. I don't know. Just some fun math there. So there you go. I don't know. What do you think about that stuff that I was talking about? I don't know if you caught a lot of it or what. But I'll put the camera back here.
Your video on Jacob and Rachel and the marriage and all that, I was pretty skeptical at first. And then as you were going through it, and then I remembered back to Jeremiah 30, was it 7 through 11? Hear me read that real quick, because then I was like, whoa, okay, I get that now. I get the reference to it. Jeremiah 30, 7 through 11. Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it, and it is the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. For it shall come to pass in that day, says the Lord of hosts, that I will break his yoke from your neck, and I will burst your bonds, and foreigners shall no more enslave them, but they shall serve the Lord their God, and that David their king, whom I will raise up for them. Therefore do not fear, O my servant Jacob, says the Lord, nor be dismayed, O Israel. For behold, I will save you from afar, and your seed from the land of their captivity. Jacob shall return and have rest and be quiet, and none shall make him afraid. For I am with you, says the Lord, to save you. Though I make a full end of all the nations where I have scattered you, yet I will not make a complete end of you, but I will correct you in justice and not let you go altogether unpunished. And we see that in Zephaniah 3:8 is kind of a subsequent passage for that, a follow-on passage for that. Now, you and I think, are on the same sheet of music in the sense that we can't, I mean, you and I can't know. I mean, we can't know when this is gonna happen exactly. But because of so many, things that are coming together, it from every different position and every different angle, it seems that we're coming on this fulcrum, and it seems to be right around the 2000th anniversary of Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. Now, I personally hold to a 33 AD crucifixion, and Tyler holds to a different day. And so when we did our Final Four video, that we have this 4-year window because we don't know exactly what year he was born, and we don't know exactly what year he was crucified. There's a lot of theories on every side about which year, and I'm okay with that. I'm not gonna. That's not a necessarily a hill I'm gonna die on. We just know we're in that ballpark right now of that window of that 2000th anniversary, and the fact that God, from Adam to Abraham was 2,000 years, and from Abraham to Christ's first coming was 2,000 years from his first coming. Now we're coming up on the 2000th anniversary from his first coming. It seems, if pattern holds true, it seems only logical that something should happen around the year 2030, plus or minus 2 or 3 years. And we got to factor in that the 70th week of Daniel, which has not happened in the past, there's nothing historically after Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. There wasn't anything that happened significant in regards to the fulfillment of the 70th week. And we see that, in fact, that it becomes an impossibility after 70 AD, because after that, the Romans destroy the temple and the city and the temple. And then it's still not been standing since 70 AD. So the fact that we are seeing now, there's a lot of things regarding Israel that I think that I want to kind of try and walk through as well here. But I think that we are at this point now that we know it's soon. I mean, we know it's soon, and there's so many different things pointing to it. Now, when I look at things, I don't necessarily look at things like the United Nations, whether they do some kind of a treaty or something, unless it specifically ties Israel's hands or does something with Israel for 7 years. I think the last time that this happened was the Oslo Accords, and that was back in the 90s. Obviously, that was failed. But if you look, and you mentioned sevens earlier, when you look back at Theodore Herzl's First Zionist Congress, that was 1897. The next kind of major event that we see with regard to Israel was in 1917 with the Balfour Treaty. And then you had the San Remo in the 1920. But then if you go to 1947, 1967, 1977, which was the start of the Land for Peace at the Camp David Accords with Israel, Egypt, and the United States. And then you go forward to 1987, which was I think it was the founding year of the Temple Mount Institute. And then you go to 2017 when Trump recognized Jerusalem as the eternal capital of Israel. And then subsequently on the 70th anniversary in May of 2018, he moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. Everything is like falling on these sevens. So I am looking at it personally. I think I can't say. I know that I can't say exactly. I'm not going to put everybody out there like that, but it's kind of well known that I'm looking at 2025, the summer of 2025, but it could very well go to 2027 as well. I mean, we kind of don't know, but it may be that something else significant happens to Israel on 2027 after the rapture. So, I mean, I'm not looking at 2027 simply because it's on a seven. I'm simply saying that it seems like things fall on sevens, like there is a political or there's some kind of it seems like the political things happen on the seven, and then that subsequent year on the eight, or whether it's 1918, 1948, 19 what is it? Not 19, but 2018. So we know that things happen generally, like the legal thing happens on the seven, and then the actual action happens that following year. It seems like that we're there. And I don't know how much else has to happen in terms of technology, geopolitics. The only things that I see that are like majorly outstanding is the Gog Magog war and the rebuilding of the third temple. Those are the two big outliers for me. Now, I don't want to get into Babylon or where I think Mystery Babylon is. I know that's still a contentious issue with a lot of prophecy experts and students of Bible prophecy. I'm not even sure where I think Mystery Babylon is anymore. I used to know, but then the more I read into Revelation and other places, I can't see it being in the ancestral homeland, where modern day Iraq is, because of passages that speak about the people on their ships are going to watch the city burning and wail and mourn because of it. And there's just no way you can do that in Iraq. I mean, unless there was a massive earthquake and then the sea kind of floods in, and the geography there in the Middle East changes dramatically between now and when Mystery Babylon is destroyed. I have a hard time seeing ancient Babylon, modern day Iraq, being Mystery Babylon anymore. But I'm gonna pause so you can jump in and say anything you want to say.
Yeah, we could talk for like 2 hours on all those things you just mentioned. Okay, just give me like a 30-second answer. What day? Okay, you think 33 AD? What day of the week do you think he died?
Well, I think it's a Wednesday. So my understanding of it, I'd have to go back and look at my notes. But the reason I said 33 was because if you go 15 years from when Tiberius, after Tiberius is in ruling, it depends on when you start that 15 years, or
Yeah,
when you
yeah,
because you
yeah.
get to his 15th year, and that's kind of the beginning of Jesus, the beginning of his 3.5 year ministry. And so I want to say that based on the coins that we found from that first century time period, whether it's Tiberius with his father on the coin together, each on one side of the coin, meaning there's like a co-rule together, or where it's just Tiberius himself. I think that when Tiberius is on the coins himself, I think that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 14 or 15 AD, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then if you look at the timing of the crucifixion, I think it can't be on any other day than a Wednesday. It has to be on a Wednesday. And that means that it either has to be in 31 or 33, because I don't know that it can be in 32 and be on a Wednesday. I'm rusty on this because I haven't looked at it in a few months. So
Yeah. Okay, so you would agree that it would have to be on a Wednesday?
yeah.
And here's a little chart that I did a while ago, and again, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but I kind of cross-examined the 30s, the 31s, the 32s, and the 33s. So if you even consider the Nissan 14, like, how some people say, oh, we're a month early or we're a month late. So I went with the month early crowd and the month late crowd, and the month that most people would consider it to be. And so in 33 AD, if you pick the month early, it's a Thursday, so that doesn't work. If you pick Friday, April 3rd, that's a Friday, that doesn't work. And Saturday is the 33rd, so that's why it doesn't work. So this is the reason why I like Wednesday, the April 25th, because it's really the only Wednesday that fits. And so the Tiberius Caesar thing is, you got a great point. It's like, when do we start it? And so it's either do we run with the co-reign of Tiberius Caesar, or do we go with when he was independently not co-reigning? That's the big question. But for me, it's like step one, it's got to be on a Wednesday. Okay, which Wednesday fits? Wednesday, March 8th does fit, but it's a little bit early to be called Passover in March 8th. So for me, I'm like, it's too early. That's too early. So this was the best Wednesday, in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, that's enough on that subject. I mean, whatever, right? Everybody understands the argument. Somebody can rebuttal what I just said and say something else, and that's fine. So
You and I think I have my calendar guy. I'm sure either you're the calendar guy or you have a calendar guy that you lean on for a lot of like the heavy academic lifting when it comes to the lunar cycle, solar, like all of the deep diving into all the different calendars and all the different going back through Stellarium or whatever, and making sure that everything lines up. So one of the guys that's contributed to my website for years now, Randy Nettles, and he goes over my head very fast when it comes, because I am not smart on all of the specifics of the what the moon looked like on this particular day and this year, because I'm not on Stellarium. I don't use a lot of those programs, so I am not smart on those things. So I rely on guys like Randy, who I trust his judgment, and he'll make his argument all day long and pull everything out of the book. So I don't know. I'm a 31 or 33, but I've always kind of leaned toward 33. But always to give myself an extra buffer time, right? Because if
Right.
if 25 comes and goes, and then that
Yeah.
automatically rules out 31 in terms of being specifically right at the 2000 years. But we don't know if it's going to be right at the specific 2000 year. It could be it could be a year after, it could be months after. We don't know. But I think regardless, I think somewhere 2030 seems to serve as a fulcrum, so to speak, of all of the prophetic events that we're seeing. And something that I've mentioned to my audience many times is that you and I weren't there. None of the experts alive today weren't there. Even the best scholars going back 200 years that know intricately all of the feasts, the lunar cycles, and yada yada yada, the calendars. Uh, even they weren't there. But you know who was there? The demons were there. The devil was there. And it seems like those forces that are currently driving the global leadership today are fixated on 2030 for some reason. So you can watch what the enemy is doing sometimes to get a hint of where you are in time, because we see them acting very it's almost like becoming frenzied with all of the stuff going on in the skies, all the stuff going on in the Middle East and the wars and the push for globalism, the push for a digital currency, all of that stuff. It seems like they are in such a mad dash to get it done by 2030, great reset and all that. So not even just looking at our own studies and our own scholarly work and the scholars that have done the work, but also looking over there and looking what the enemy forces are seemingly fixated on this year, 2030 seems to be interesting. If you watch the enemy, like when Russia was getting ready to invade Ukraine, I was doing a live stream with Tom Hughes, 2021 or whatever, and he was asking me what I thought about it, and I said, well, Russia is moving all of these forces to the border. They're moving their hospitals, they're moving their tank divisions, they're moving their infantry, they're moving their aviation, they're moving all of these guys along the border with Ukraine. And I said that cost millions, tens of millions, perhaps hundreds of millions of rubles every month to do that. And I said, either this is the most expensive ruse in all of modern, history, or they mean to do what they say. They're going to invade Ukraine, because they're not going to just do that and not just to not do it, just to do it, just to kind of to flex their muscles. They can flex their muscles any other in any number of ways. So that you watch the enemy what they're doing, and they actually did come and they invaded, right? So the enemy will telegraph what they're going to do if you just pay attention to watch what they're doing. So somehow 2030 seems to be where all this stuff seems to center around, and it also lines up with the 2000th anniversary of Christ, plus or minus 3 years or so.
Yeah. When it comes to the cross, I think it's either God did it intentionally or the enemy's at work. But I think it's done. You know what? Maybe it's just God. Maybe God didn't want us to know the actual date of the crucifixion. Maybe He wanted us to keep us on our toes and just have us, not confident in any of the dates. Really, I don't know, but we don't know for sure. But yeah, I think Russia is a major player. I think Turkey is a major player. I think Iran is a major player. Libya and Sudan. So I've got a lot of interest in tracking with what Turkey's doing as well, because of the Ezekiel 38 stuff. And they're very anti-Israel right now in general. Didn't they just they made they stopped some sort of an agreement with Israel like 2 months ago. I can't remember what it was, but something significant with trade or something like that. So there's all that. I mean, and earlier on, you talked about Babylon, and there's so many perspectives on that. I don't know if you want to go down that road or not. That's an interesting topic too. But yeah, you tell me what direction you want to go.
Okay, well, I'm going to pull this back up real quick, and let's see, add to stage. Okay, so for me, because I am not the expert on historical dating and all that kind of stuff, I don't ever claim to be. I never have. But if we look at scripture and just use scripture to kind of guide us, we know we're in the season. We know that every Christian should know that if they open their Bible and they read their Bible, so they should be able to look at that and then kind of just gauge the general trend of where the world is moving. The world is moving away from paper money. It's moving toward a digital currency. We see in Revelation 13 that the Antichrist, when he finally comes to power, he's able to control all buying and selling all over the world. So we look at digital currency as like a marker, a trend thing that we can watch to see how it's going. It may have started off with cash, then it went to checking accounts, and then it went to credit cards, and then to debit cards, and then you're paying on your phone. Now you're paying with your hand, your palm, your eye, and you can see where things are going. That's just kind of a general trend line. You look at anti-Semitism in the world. Prior to October 7th, 2023, yeah, we knew we knew that the Hamas and Hezbollah, they hated the Jews. We knew basically in the Middle East and maybe certain parts of Europe there was some anti-Semitism, but generally that had some type of Muslim flavoring to it. Some imam or some mosque was promoting anti-Semitism in certain capitals in Europe and stuff like that, and you can see that. But October 7th ripped the Band-Aid off of all that, and it exposed this growing hatred, not just against Zionist people that are promoting Israel or promoting repatriation of the land and the people back to the land, but Jews, just because they're Jews. They hate the Jews because they are Jews. That level of anti-Semitism is satanic. It's satanically inspired, and you can see it's like a zeitgeist that has swept the planet across the universities and everywhere. And even very liberal Jewish people that are well-to-do in the United States, whether they're actors or whether they're people in banking or other things, they obviously they know this. This was a huge eye opener for them. So I can't think of anything more significant for Israel that's happened in terms of this awakening sense of self-identifying as a Jew and what that means to be a Jew than what happened on October 7th, 2023, the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War to the day, right? So anti-Semitism ramping up. You can see that in Zechariah 12, that all the nations are going to, Jerusalem's going to be a cup of trembling, and all the nations that try to divide the land are going to get destroyed. We're seeing that, right? We're seeing the diminishing of the United States. The world in general has been under the orbit, or been in the orbit, of Pax Americana since the end of World War II. That's coming to an end. We're having these problems now in the Congress and the president, the elections, etc., that they're increasingly like impossible to solve, even with Trump winning, even with him taking over. And if we get to the inauguration day and if things continue on, he's still got $36 trillion in national debt on top of that's insurmountable. That's like if you and I mean, let's just say I made $80,000 a year and I had a $10 billion credit card bill that I had to try to make payments on every month. I couldn't do it. I just don't make enough money to do it. There's not enough American taxpayer or Canadian taxpayers or Mexican taxpayers, if we put all the countries together, to even pay down the interest on that stuff. So the system we're under is it's collapsing. We're watching it collapse right now, and we're trying to figure out how to prevent that from turning into a free fall. The only solution that they're going to go to is digital currency. And when you bring in Donald Trump, who I like what he is. I mean, I like the idea of living under freedom, as much freedom as I can. I'm sure you would rather have somebody other than Trudeau there, but I would rather live under freedom while I can until the Lord returns, because then we don't have the censorship, the deplatforming, the debanking. We were able to get the gospel out as much as we can. We can talk about Jesus. It's not one of those words that's banned on YouTube, where we have to start using like acronyms, or we have to start using code words to talk about Jesus or the gospel. We can still do that right now because this door has remained open, right? This open door, which the internet has become, the YouTube and these other online ministries. I was telling Tom the other day, and I said 30, 40 years ago, nobody would know who you were, let alone go to another country and do a conference there and have 1,000 people show up. They wouldn't even know who you were, really. It's because God has opened this door right at the same time that churches around the world are closing their doors. This door has been opened up, and we have far greater reach now than we ever did. So the gospel is going out in places it's never gone to before. The gospel, this video, other videos like this, people talking about the gospel, other ministries, they're making their way into places like China, Iran, Iraq, all throughout the Middle East, places where the gospel, you couldn't send in missionaries, you couldn't send in and establish a church there because they are, Christianity is illegal. We're seeing we're seeing this great last push, I think, for the gospel to get out, and that door is only going to remain open so long. Once we get to the whatever the time is, and this time that we think is coming up very, very soon, I think that door is going to shut. And it's going to shut with the rapture of the church, which is going to collapse the United States, which is going to create the requisite crisis for the world to embrace some type of global system. And now the digital currency infrastructure is already built. They've already gone through all the test banks, the test runs with the banks, the major banks, Bank of America, Citibank, all those, to do the central bank digital currency. So all that groundwork has been laid even months and months ago. I'm sure they're working out the wickets on it right now, but it's going to happen. That's going to happen. And I don't care. It didn't matter who's in office. They're going to be faced with this insurmountable problem. Like either we collapse completely or we switch over to this new digital system. And as Trump comes in, you've got a guy like Elon Musk right there by his side who's really heavily involved in two of the three major technological things that we see present in Revelation 13 with Starlink and Neuralink, right? And then behind him is Peter Thiel, who's all tied up into digital currency and cryptocurrencies, etc. Same thing with JD Vance. Same thing with all these other guys. So it seems very logical to me that when that crisis happens, when the United States, whether that happens before the rapture or after the rapture, that the only solution is going to be a digital solution. And that's going to open the door for the mark of the beast eventually, because we're seeing how technology is increasingly becoming more and more to the point where it's going into the human body. And it will go into the human body by a form of some type of biometric technology, quantum dot tattoo or electronic tattoo, whatever the case is. It's going to go into the body, and that's eventually will become what the mark of the beast is. I don't want to get into the rabbit trailing of what all the biological aspects of it with the nanobots, etc. But I want to stay more focused on time. But my point is that we're seeing all these major general trend lines all pushing us to a certain point right here. And one of the things, Aaron, that Tyler and I talked about before, with regard to the final 2 years, so we did the final four in 2023, I think, or 2022. And then we did the final four here just a few months ago. One of the things I want to get your take on this, because I made a statement on there and I made a point to make it. I want to see how if you agree, disagree, etc. That once we go past, let's just say hypothetically, nothing happens up from now to 2033. We're still here. There's nothing. We're still looking every year, but nothing has happened. I made the point that when you keep going further out, not all, but increasingly Bible prophecy, the things that were prophesied that seemingly had timestamps associated with it, like Hosea 5 through 6, they begin to lose their meaning. They become there's nothing to tether it to anymore, because we've already gone past those, we've blown past those time markers. And now the further we go away from, say, 2030, the things become increasingly less relevant, like Psalm 90, when it's talking about the age of a man, the age of a life, and how people have tied that to the fig tree parable, etc. What do you think about that statement that I made? I mean, you don't have to agree with me just because you're on my show, but tell me what your thought. The further we move away from 2030, the less relevant Bible prophecy or these specific prophecies become, and they become almost nonsensical, and we begin to not be able to use them. But I could be missing things. There may be things in 2050, 2060, 2070 that I'm not seeing.
Yeah, great question. I think one response is I honestly am looking at things in a non-emotional way now. Like, not that I was before, but extremely non-emotional. You think it's 3380. I think it's probably 3180. But I'm not picking 3180 because I want to get raptured sooner. I picked it from a very logical perspective. And the Hosea 6:2, if we're looking at it as a 2,000-year prophecy, yeah, that's going to expire soon. that whole idea is going to expire soon if we don't get out of here really soon. there will, if we're here after 2033, it's certainly back to the drawing board with a lot of thought. And you know, like the parable I read at the beginning of this video, how are we meant to understand that the Good Samaritan is coming back after 2 days? What does that mean? Yeah, what is Hosea 6:2 supposed to say after 2 days? Is it tied to something else? You know, how are we supposed to understand a lot of these things? And yeah, things start to get a little bit. What do you found a lot of this stuff on, right? Like, where's the foundation? Where's the basis of your 6,000 year timeline? It starts to kind of crumble a little bit as far as our perspective is, if it's not going to be for another, you know, whatever, 10 years or something like that from now. And going back to your other point too about the economy and things of that nature. I mean, part of the reason why I didn't think it was going to happen before 2020, I didn't even have my channel. I wasn't thinking about the second coming of the rapture at that point, because I just knew it wasn't going to happen. I wasn't looking at all. I was a Christian at that time, but common sense told me there's no reason to officially be looking. I mean, we're still far away from very reasonable things that need to be in place. One of my things that I just knew without thinking hard was there needed to be a better financial system in place, because I do agree. I think that the mark of the beast will be yeah, some sort of a chip or something in your body, and somehow tied to maybe Neuralink or something like that. Like, I did a video about a month ago. Neuralink equals 666 in Greek. Like, but we're not, like, Neuralink comes from the word Neuralink in Greek. There's no, and it's not even a translation. It came from the word Neuralink. Like, so go back and check my video like a month ago on that if you want. But the point is, the value of it equals 666 in Greek, the value system. Like the value system for Hebrew and Greek, that's actually how you would use numbers, right? So and in Hebrew, Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, Gimel is 3, Dalet is 4. Well, in Greek, every letter represents a number, so that equals 666 as well. Go figure. So so you know, when we started to tap our credit cards at the stores, at that point, then I was like, okay, now we're getting some here. We're tapping cards to pay for groceries. Okay, now the infrastructure is here. So I don't know what year that would have been. I don't know. People started tapping what, in 2019, 2020, stuff like that. Started to become normal.
Yeah,
now
right.
It's like really available almost everywhere. Sometimes you got to put in your passwords and all that, but like the infrastructure is pretty much everywhere, at least in my experience. I don't know about your experience where you are, but the system's there. And also another thing that we need to recognize is BRICS is really moving along quite well. They really have an infrastructure that is getting set up as well, that is completely in opposition to the US dollar. You know, that's another thing. I think that the economy is really shifting more than people realize underneath our feet, so to speak. So there's a debt that can't be paid for, and there's an economy shift that people aren't really recognizing that's going on behind the scenes. So, you know, and then the advancement of the AIs and all these robots doing all these crazy things. I don't want to even see what the potential possibilities are with all that 10 years down the road. I like, it's going to be scary, like with all this technology. I don't know. Like, it's one of those things, you know, that exponential growth, where when you get to a certain point, it's just ridiculous near the end of the spectrum of exponential growth. That 10 years from now, a lot of prophecy puzzles are going to be. I mean, I just can't see it. I can't see it, and with the way things are going, I don't know. It's just the technology is going to be out of hand, and yeah. So it all makes sense right now.
The question that I posed to you earlier in talking about how, as we move further away from 2030 and the 2000th anniversary and everything tied up with that in terms of the second day or coming on the third day, that would break typology, in my opinion. And so, you know, how seriously does God take typology? It might seem like a fringe topic to some more modern progressive pastors and clergy, oh, that doesn't really mean anything. Remember back, and I was having to look to the actual chapter of it, but in Numbers 20, when Moses strikes the rock the second time, right? The first time he strikes it is in Exodus to provide water for people, and then the second time he strikes it, he broke typology because he was only supposed to speak to it, because that was supposed to represent Christ. Christ was only going to die once. He's not coming to die twice. Same thing with like John the Baptist. When you read John chapter 1 verse 29, and then you skip down a few verses to, I think it's verse 36 or whatever, on the first time that John says it, he says, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world." And then the next day John sees Jesus again, he says, "Behold the Lamb of God." He doesn't say that second part. He doesn't say it because it would have broken typology. And same thing with Moses here. Moses broke typology and he was not allowed to enter into the promised land. And he was allowed to see it. He was able to go up on the mountain and see it. And then after, when he died, God buries him. God takes his body and buries him, right? And we see that contested by Satan, or between Michael the archangel and Satan in Jude. When we read that there, and people are like, why would that be an issue? Like, we didn't even know that happened. Well, it happened because Satan wanted that body to create some type of a shrine and become an idol that the people would worship, and he would be able to derail the Israelites that way by worshiping the dead body of Moses. So God prevented that by removing Moses. But why didn't Moses go into the promised land? Because, well, not only because he represents the law, and the law in terms of that's a whole nother subject, but the fact that he broke typology, he was forbidden to enter in the promised land. So that's in Numbers 20. It says, verse 10, "And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock and said to them, 'Hear now, you rebels, must we bring water for you out of this rock?' And then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their animals drank. And then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, 'Because you did not believe me to hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them.'" Furthermore, he's not allowed in either, right? So uh, God takes this seriously. So I can't see. I have an incredibly difficult time us going past 2030 and the rapture has not happened yet, because then we're starting to move away from typology. We're beginning to move away from these patterns that are established in Scripture. Uh, and I don't have, nobody in the audience, nobody has to be a calendar expert to know that it's been nearly 2,000 years since Jesus was on the earth. We can disagree on what exact year, but we're coming up on that time period, that anniversary. And I don't think that anniversary is going to come and go without something happening specifically for the church. The church has to be removed prior to the 70th week. We have no time, place, meaning, rhyme, reason, or anything to be inside that 7 years. That 7 years is set aside for the nation of Israel and the non-believing nations of the world. The 70th week is specifically set aside for Israel. But as I read earlier with Jeremiah 30, there's a dual purpose. He's going to discipline Israel, but he's also going to destroy this current global man structure, Satan ran structure of the world. And then that will culminate with Christ coming in Revelation 19, the second coming, in which he establishes his kingdom here on the earth in what is now, Israel today. So the throne of David that we read about in 2 Samuel 7, that the throne that's promised to endure forever, David's throne, it's also reiterated in Luke chapter 1, I think verse 33, 34, somewhere in there. That throne of David is not in heaven, it's in Jerusalem. He is coming back to this earth to establish his kingdom. And as I said at the outset, this reality that we exist in right now, the way the world is right now, this is not, God didn't make this world and go through everything that he went through so that we could live in this kind of environment for all eternity, for the next 200 years. This present age that we live in has a shelf life. It's going to come to an end, just like every other dispensation before us came to an end, had a beginning and came to an end, you know? And so we are in that little pause between the 69th week and the 70th week. And since the church wasn't in the first 69 weeks, we have no business being in the 70th week as well. And I can go into all manner of, I've done it in the past, why we are not in the 70th week, why we are not in the tribulation, why the church doesn't set one foot inside of the 7-year tribulation, how bad things get between now and then. it's anybody's guess, but I think in some regards, if for example, we bring things down to like the local level, with Trump being in versus Harris or Biden or Obama or whoever, and possibly, hopefully, with Trudeau going out the door and somebody like Polyev becoming, is that how you say his name? Polyev, Pierre, Pierre Polyev?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. French, anyways. But he, if he comes in, he may make things a little easier in Canada for people to just survive. To bring inflation down so people can afford their groceries and put gas in their car and things like that. I don't want those things because I want to spend the next 100 years, trying to create MAGA. MAGA is not biblical. MAGA is not the way that God says things are going to go. So whatever this is, we're in a very small reprieve before things start going off the rails, and things will start happening very quickly. I don't know if you read, I think it's Hemingway, but there's a quote from him and these two guys in his story are talking, and it says, "Well, how did you go bankrupt?" And the other guy was like, "Well, slowly at first, and then all of a sudden, it just kind of happened all gradually at first, and then suddenly, like if things will seem normal, and then boom, things will start just collapsing all over the place." And uh, I think talking about this and reinforcing this idea, this not idea, but this reality that Christ is coming back for us is an important reminder that we need to keep talking about throughout the year, especially as chaotic as the world has become, even in the last 4 years since, 2020, things have really become nuts. So it's to me, hopefully it's encouraging to everybody out there. And you and I are not claiming to say, hey, it's going to happen on this day, this hour, whatever. We're just saying, hey, we know we're in the season, and here are reasons why we think it's going to be this period of time, this year. Even if we were to apply Matthew 24:36 and say no man knows the day or the hour, it doesn't say anything about knowing the year or knowing the month. Even I would say that we can't have some idea. I think God rewards those who diligently search things out, just as it talks about in Proverbs 25:2. That it's God's, what's his glory to conceal a thing, and the kings are going out, it's their glory to go out and search these things out to see. And so I think it's a worthy endeavor. You and I are pursuing, this is not some fringe topic that doesn't impact reality. This is all about reality. This is the real reality that we're talking about. This is where we're going to spend eternity with. This reality we live in right now, the desk I have here, the computer, the chair, the house, the town I'm in, the roads, all of that, this is all temporary. This is not real reality. Reality is the eternal realm where God dwells, and that is coming every single day that we're here. Every minute of every day, we are inching closer to that time when we're going to have that date with destiny, that divine appointment with God's prophetic calendar.
Yeah, a lot of good things said there. And like I said before, I'm actually I lean toward the fact that we might even get to know the day, and I'm not even afraid to consider the day, and why not? And God reveals things to people. He reveals things to babes. We have the Holy Spirit in us that is the teacher of all things, and so actually I'll be so bold to say there is no rapture verse that says that we won't know when the rapture is going to be. And part of those mysteries, one of the mysteries was just simply the mystery of the church being a thing. That was one of the mysteries too. And it wasn't the mystery. And then another mystery was just the idea of the rapture, and not necessarily the mystery of the date of the rapture, but just the whole concept of the rapture was an odd thing. And so, I mean, another number thing that's kind of fun is I mentioned it a couple times in some videos, but Anna the prophetess was 84 years old. Go figure. Okay, so 1948 plus 84, 2032. Okay, how about that? That's fun. And her name means happy and favored to see the face of God. That's the meaning of her name, and from the tribe that she's from. There's three names in there, but the name of her and where she's from, happy and favored to see the face of God. I mean, so if she represents Israel, that's what Israel will be doing at the second coming. They'll be happy and favored to see the face of God, you know. And so there's a mention of 84 there. There's a mention of 7 years of being, I think it says being married. And then there's another mention of Jesus in that same chapter. He's 12 years old. He's 12 years old when he's seen teaching. Mom and dad forgot them, and they came back a couple days later. Go figure. What are the odds of that? And I go, where are you for the last couple days? And but like just pulling out the numbers of that chapter, we got a number 84, we got 7 years, and we got 12. Well, what's 84 divided by 7? It's 12. Or, you know, in other words, what's 84 divided by 12? It's 7. So 7 times 12 is 84. Why are all those numbers in that chapter? I mean, it's just speculation, but that's pretty fun. I mean, so 7 represents the church. There's 7 churches in the book of Revelation. 12, the 12 tribes of Israel. 7 times 12, the connection in 84, in the 84th year, perhaps, maybe the church, the Jew and the Gentile become one at the second coming. In chapter 2 of Luke, I mean, taking those 3 numbers and maybe connecting those together makes a little bit of sense to at least acknowledge those numbers are there. Interpretations come and go, but I think it's pretty significant that she's 84. And there's not too many mentions of 84 in the Bible too. It's just an odd place to be positioned. And then, of course, that follows the story of Simeon, and the Holy Spirit was all over Simeon. It mentions like 3 or 4 times the Holy Spirit led him to do this and led him to do that. And the Holy Spirit told him he's not going to die until he sees Jesus in the flesh, the Messiah in the flesh. And then he sees him. He's like, yeah, I saw him. And he's going to be light to the Gentiles and to the Jewish nation. And so, and he prophesied and all these things. So, you know, he could be a representation of the church in some ways too, in many ways. But there's just so many fun patterns like that. And, you know, going back to Moses, actually, you said this. Moses was 120 years old when he died. And so you can divide Moses' life up into 3 equal parts, because he was 40 when he left Egypt. He was 80 when he came back to take them out. And then he was 120 when he died. Moses representing the law, writing the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. So every 50 years is a jubilee. Okay, so Moses being 120 years old, multiplied by 50, that's 6,000. Could we apply that to 6,000 years? You know, could that be a representation of the law? And then the next age, you know, that 6,000 year thing. I mean, maybe. But the year is really significant because it looks like it was the year 1406 in particular that they crossed the Jordan. Like I said, because of those Assyrian records. And so, and there was a 7-year window when they crossed the Jordan, took Jericho, and then they started to make war with the surrounding nations. It took them 7 years to do that before they started to divvy up the promised land. And so 1406, if you take the year 490 and times it by 7, you know, Daniel 9, it's a 490-year prophecy. Times that by 7, well, that gets you to 2025 in the year count. And if you take the year that they divided up the land 7 years later in 1399 BC, that gets you to 2032 BC. 80, I should say. Sorry. So it gets you to a nice pocket of 7 years when they crossed Jordan and when they made war with the surrounding nations. That's Israel making war in their tribulation. And then you can use that mathematical pattern to get to 2025, 2032. I'll say one thing that I don't like about what I just said, because that pushes everything back 1 year. And this is going to support more of a 2026 to 2033, but I'll say it anyway. Caleb's age was 78 when they crossed Jordan, and it was 85 when they divvied up the land. So there's your 7 years there, but that would support 2026 to 2033. So take that with a grain of salt, you know, however you want to look at that. But it still supports the general season of where we're in right now. But yeah, any thoughts on that?
How you brought up jubilees are from my understanding, and again, I'm not claiming to be an expert on this, but is it the 50th or the 70th jubilee? I think is it the 50th that was starting in 2025? And I think that ties back to 1406 all the time that Israel was in their land. I think it ends up being like something like 50 or 70 jubilees or something to that effect. I think this is like this would be like the 70th or the 50th. I can't remember which it is. I think maybe the 70th. Are
Oh,
you up on the
I
speed on
see.
that?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. 70 times 50 is 3,500. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Well, if a jubilee is first of all every 50 years, so why are we timesing it by 70?
No, I didn't know if it was 50 or if it was 70 jubilees from 1406, all the time
Oh,
that Israel was in their land.
yeah. Let me just think about that. Okay, so 3,430. Let me just get my calculator out and see what you're saying here. It's actually
If you were going to do that
69.
all in your head, I was going to be very impressed.
69 times 50. Okay, so it's been 69 jubilee cycles since what I'm just mentioned. Yeah, that's neat. That's neat. That's actually neat, Pete. That's really neat. It's been 69 jubilee cycles since they crossed the Jordan to 2025. That's really neat. That's really neat. That's really neat. I never made that connection. That's because Daniel's 70th week. We're waiting for
Yeah.
that. So it's been 69 jubilee cycles since they crossed the Jordan. And it'll be the end of 69 jubilee cycles from when they divvied up the promised land to the second coming. That's really neat.
Yeah.
Here, I'll show you what I just did there. You see the math there?
Yeah.
So
Well, what that brings me to the point is that you and I, obviously, we don't think that we have to wait to the end of that 70th, because I think a lot of things have to happen in that final jubilee to include the rapture of the church. If there's a gap, I don't know if you believe in a gap between the rapture and the actual start of the 70th week, but however long that gap may be, the 7 years itself, the additional time we see at the end of the tribulation, was it the 1290th day, it talks about in Daniel 12, and then the 1335th day, as well as the commencement of the ushering in of the kingdom age. I have a theory, and this is completely irrelevant to what you and I are talking about, but the reason that John mentions the 153 fish that are caught I think it's at the end of John, when they're fishing all night, and then they see somebody on the shore, and he's like, do you have any fish? And he tells them to throw the net on the other side. And so they find out that it's Jesus. And then Peter jumps in the water and he's racing, and they finally count all the fish that they brought out of this net. It was 153. So a theory that I had was that you have the 144,000 that are sealed in the 70th week. There's no finality, I guess, into what happens to them necessarily. We see them again in Revelation 14 with Christ. That seems to be looking forward in time, like John is showing something that's going to happen in the future to where he was inside of the vision itself. But it could be that leaves 144. If you subtract 153, was that 6 and 8 or 9? It could be that there could be that many people in the thousands that enter into the kingdom age. 153,000 enter into the kingdom age. I don't know. That's just some wild speculation that I'm doing. But if we think about the kingdom age and the ensuing 1,000-year kingdom on the earth, there is I think a lot of people don't, the problems that all these other, like, post-tribulation has, pre-wrath, etc., is that when they put the rapture at the second coming or right at the end there, and you have all the saints that are glorified, and then all the wicked are cast into outer darkness, that doesn't leave anybody left to repopulate the planet. And we know by the end of by the end in Revelation 20, at the end of that 1,000 years, there's an army that comes against Christ in Jerusalem and all that. That's vast. I mean, it's like, as the stars in the sky are like sand on the seashores. I mean, it's a vast army that comes to tries to overthrow Christ one last time. So it has to start off with a certain amount of people that begin to repopulate, and then when you add in like long lifespans, you add in the enhanced health, etc., of these mortal people that enter into the kingdom age, their offspring, their children, generations at this point will go down. You're looking at maybe 20 billion people that have to inhabit the planet. So I bring that up to say that between the start of the 70th Jubilee and the end of the 70th Jubilee, a lot of things have to happen to even make that possible for people to put 20 billion people on the planet. And what I mean by that is like the the regreening of the Sahara Desert, of the Arctic. Every place on the planet will be inhabitable, farmland, forest, crystal clear rivers, etc. That's going to happen across the globe. Now, I know Christ can do it, like snap his finger, it can happen, but he could have done that with creation as well. He didn't have to go through these 24-hour days and create this thing on this day and then this thing. He did that as a pattern for us, which is why I hold very closely to like the 6,000 year, the seventh, seven, what is it, the day, age, creation, whatever, that each day would represent 1,000 years. And so far we've seen human history goes about 6,000. We're at the 6,000th year mark somewhere right now. I don't think that if we broke that pattern, I mean, for me, all bets are off. I'd be like, I don't know, because that to me, the fact that God did creation that way, he did it purposefully, especially with regard to the Sabbath, for the day for the man to rest on. If that was meant for mankind, then the other days, the fact that Jesus appears at the 4,000th year on the fourth day in creation, you have the sun, right? The sun comes out, and we don't have the sun on day one where you're separating light from darkness. And that's what throws a lot of non-Christians off, and people that are, pro-evolution or Big Bang Theory or whatever. They're like, well, how can you have light without the sun? Because they're only thinking from a naturalistic perspective. But God can separate the light from the darkness. But he introduces the sun, moon, and stars on the fourth day. And Christ is the son of God, the Son of Man. He represents the sun in terms of bringing light into a darkened world. So all of those things and the fact that man is on the sixth day, we're in the 6,000th year. The Antichrist is the trifecta of like the man times three, 666, etc. That to me means that creation pattern has meaning to it. And if we go beyond where the start of that 6,000th day is, then we start breaking the models, typology, etc. We start getting into a place that God punished Moses for. So I don't think God's going to break his own pattern. So that's kind of where I find it interesting that so many things have to happen still in the 70th Jubilee. And I think that even comes from like the Essenes calendar or something. So I'm not very studied on the Essenes. If people want to go check out the Essenes, they can look at Ken Johnson. I'm not sure who else besides Ken Johnson does it, but for everybody in the audience, in the show notes or in the link below, I posted an article that I shared with Aaron prior to this by Don Koenig. It's When Will Jesus Christ Return? He's got that huge, I don't know, did you like that table he had put together? It's like, and that thing was done in 2007. And that's the one thing I read right as I was coming back into my faith, that article that really grounded me. And from about that time, 2007 to 2009 in period, I kind of realized that, or at least I came to the understanding that the second coming, all of this stuff wouldn't happen until like the second coming wouldn't happen until like the early 2030s, which would put the rapture and stuff back somewhere in the 2020s. So not a very popular position back in 2009, 10, 11, very not popular. I don't know. I don't remember all the hate that I caught from it, but I kind of looked at it like that. Everybody was looking at 2011. Everybody was fixated on 2011 because 2018 was going to be the 70th anniversary of Israel's rebirth, and tying that back in with Psalm 90:10. So when 2011 came and went, I mean, people were crushed. And then you had 2012 with the what was it, the calendar, the Indians in Central America, the Mayan calendar. And then you had the 2014, 2015 blood moon triad or tetrads, then 2017. And so we've had all these things, and we can always kind of look at things that seem to indicate closeness or some kind of proximity to the rapture of the second coming. But for me, everything seems to be pointing to somewhere in the neighborhood of 2030. It seems like that's like we're coming up on this crescendo. Things are still building and building and building. And I feel like the rapture is going to be that release from all that uh, pressure that's been on the world, and people are going to be scattered. It's if I can take one more second here, look, think about just what we just went through with the U.S. elections in November 5th. Prior to that, I mean, everybody was sure that Harris was going to win. The media, everybody was championing that. And then when they lost, it was such a resounding defeat. They were leaderless. They didn't have anybody to lead the Democrat Party. They were disheveled, just broken that Trump is in again for the third time, and he won this time. And it's like everything fell apart. The media, the liberal media that had been so in the tank for the Democrats, all of their ratings crashed. They're firing hosts left and right, all these. And so they're kind of just, they don't have a plan right now. They don't have a plan of going on. And I think that when the US collapses at the rapture, it's going to be like the same thing. And what happens when people are desperate? They do desperate things, and they will go after a man, just like the broken Germans at the end of World War I. They were broken people. Their economy was shattered. Their currency was garbage. And they clung to a guy that offered them the Third Reich. They offered them the 1,000-year Reich. In their desperation, they cried out for a man that was offering them everything. And this is the Antichrist, right? I look at Hitler as kind of a forerunner of the Antichrist. And the world's going to be broken. And some guy's going to step forward out of all that chaos and out of all that misery that comes on the backside of the rapture. He's going to say, I'm going to lead us into a new age. And he's going to, whatever, all the stuff, the passages that speak about his nature and his character and stuff. And desperate people do desperate things. And that's my point, was that we looked for so long, for so many years. We wanted to, I think in our own desperation as the church, we were looking at every little thing, but we don't have to look hard anymore. It used to be when I first started writing prophecy back in 2011. I mean, it was like we were talking about things that were still far in the future, or we were talking about things that were far in the past, but not a lot super prophetic was happening in the present. But slowly and surely things begin to pick up faster and faster. And now you can't even keep up. I mean, it's going nuts. And it's been like that for going on 4 or 5 years. I mean, really, I guess you could go back to 2017, when Trump recognized Jerusalem as the eternal capital of Israel. From that time forward, I think prophetically speaking, things have been going off the rails. And now it's just like at a fever pitch. And I think it's going to keep going to this fever pitch until the rapture. And then at that point, everything's going to fall apart. Western civilization is going to be in shambles because everybody's been orbiting in this American orbit since the end of World War II. And when that all starts to fall apart, and it's not going to fall apart gradually, it's going to collapse suddenly, just like it talks about in 1 Thessalonians 5. When they say peace and safety, sudden destruction is going to come upon them, and it's going to happen gradually, then suddenly, boom, the bottom's going to fall out. And in their desperation, that's where the Antichrist, this man, whoever he is, he may be Elon Musk, he may be Trudeau, he may be some other guy we don't know yet, and probably, in fact, we're not going to know who he is exactly, but some guy will rise up and offer this plan, and then he'll already have the technology in place. He'll have the digital currency stuff in place. He'll have most of the infrastructure in place for a global system, to include drones, swarm technology, hive mind. All of that stuff is going to be available for him at his fingertips. He's not going to have to build this stuff. He's just going to have to direct it and where he wants to take control. And so that's why I'm super excited between now and, I don't know, it just seems like each day it's just more and more, So I know one of these days you and I are going to be right, and we're gonna even CJ Lovick will be right if he keeps doing his charts every year. He's like, this is why it's 2022. This is why it's 2023. And I like CJ Lovick. I think he's got a good heart and a good intent. He just keeps plugging away every year. But eventually he's gonna get it right. I just happen to think we're in this kind of window now. It's gonna be sometime, and we should be excited, and this should motivate us to go out and share the gospel.
Well, first of all, I got to correct that whole number thing I was talking about, the Jubilee thing. So 70 times 50 is 3,450, but the cycle from 1406 to all that is 3,430. So there's a 20-year difference in there. So anyway, that's what happens on a live stream when you get numbers thrown at you, and you know. So consider all things. Get your calculators out and figure that all out. Back to the basics of creation, though, because you know Pete was bringing up Genesis 1, where the fourth day the sun and the moon came into existence, and then man was created in the sixth day. But on the seventh day, God rested. And so there's another talk about prophecy, talk about patterns. Well, Genesis 1 tells us that there's going to be a millennial reign in the last 1,000 years. So again, going back to what Pete said before, like how much further can we go with all these patterns and prophecies really making sense? It kind of, for me, it kind of breaks Genesis 1 a little bit if we're here much longer than this general window, you know. Like, so for me, in my mind, before things start to really crumble, without being emotional, just very intellectual, logically thinking about everything, the furthest that I can logically stretch this out in my mind is 2034 being the second coming, and minusing 7 years for that, for tribulation, something like that. So whatever the year that is. So what is that, 27? Okay, so 25, 32, 26, 33, 27, 34. Is that how it would work out? Something like that.
Yeah.
And then after that, I'm like, I don't know. Now I don't know how to make sense of anything, unless Jesus died at a weird, like, I don't even know where do you throw the dart at that point, you know, in terms of things start to break apart a bit. So yeah.
That's why, for me, the fact that we really only changed 2 calendars from the time that Christ was crucified. We went from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian. That's pretty easy to work out the leap years, you know, all the weird things that happen with time, you know, the calendars and so forth, and the translation in time, being on a 365.24 year day count, you know, calendar, annual calendar. I think that's, for us, that's going to, it's much easier for us to look at it that way than to try to go to the BC time period, where we're having to convert the Hebrew, what do they use? A lunar solar calendar, then going back to the lunar calendar, then going back to kind of antiquity. Even I say it's not nearly impossible, but it gets incredibly difficult to go beyond Noah into the antediluvian period to try and reckon time without using the genealogies in Genesis 5, and, you know, Genesis 5 and Genesis 10. And the problem that, you know, for instance, there are cool things that you can pull out of the Septuagint, in terms of the chronology that they have set up in the Septuagint. It's about 1,500 years earlier than where we are today. So in the year 500 AD, that would have been their 6,000th year under the Septuagint genealogy, using the timelines in the Septuagint. In the Byzantine Empire were very hyped on this. They were very excited, thinking that the year 500 was going to be the 6,000th year, and then the ushering in of the kingdom. But obviously, the Septuagint was wrong. We're still here 1,500 years later. So for us, I think we have, in terms of, I don't know what your affiliate, you know, how you feel about Septuagint, but like, for me, I think there's fascinating things that you can pull from it, but the genealogy is not one. It's clearly proven itself incorrect how they reckon the time there, simply because we're already 1,500 years after the 6,000th year, which would have happened in the 500s somewhere. But the fact that we are close, and I don't know. I'm super excited about. It's exciting to see the prophetic things come into fulfillment. It's also sad in a sense. Like, I don't like to see war. I don't like to see innocent people die. I don't like to see the increase in crime and violence and all the other wickedness that we're going to see this escalation on. So it's kind of a mixed bag. It's like that little book that John has to eat in that it's sweet, and then it turns his stomach sour. And I feel like, yes, we're excited, but at the same time, we're looking at all the horrible things happening in the world, and I think it just, in our spirit, we just cry out, come, Lord, just come. I mean, how much longer do we have to be in this world that's so drenched in violence and blood and wickedness? I mean, every single day of the week, you could turn on the news and see something absolutely horrible, somewhere happening in the world. And in often cases, it's happening in multiple places all at the same time. So I don't know how much longer God allows us to go on. I mean, that's the other aspect to it. We know that God's long suffering, that none should perish, but that long suffering also has an end. It's not going to just continue on indefinitely. There is going to come to an end to it. So how do you measure that end? How do you reckon that end, reconcile that end with where we are in time? Yeah, for me, you have to look at the pattern set forth in the Bible. You have to look for the typology that's set forth in the Bible, and then the written word that's set forth. So we have the three witnesses in Scripture in terms of just the pattern, the typologies that we see, and then the actual written word itself that gives us those clues to know that we're in the season. And so for me, I have a really difficult time seeing things go beyond 2030. I mean, incredibly difficult time.
When you say
Um,
when you say 2030, do you mean rapture by 2030?
no, I just mean anything. The rapture is going to have to happen prior to that. And I look
Yeah.
at a year 2025 as a prime candidate for the rapture year. And here's another thing that I didn't get to. I don't think I shared the Tish thing with you, but I don't personally hold to the rapture having to happen on a feast date. But if there is any kind of connection with Israel, I think that the rapture would happen on Tish B'Av. So I can't remember what day. If somebody in the audience wants to look that up, like what day and month it happens this year, the 2 days or whatever that it happens this year. The reason I look at the Tish B'Av is because, traditionally, and you're familiar with this, the historical relationship between that date and terrible things happening to Israel. You count like 20, 30 different things throughout history where this has been the case, going back to 1406. So the fact that we're coming up now, or, each year that we have Tish B'Av is, at least since I started the 4-year Final Four, that's been the time of the year that I've really been looking at, because if the rapture happened on a Tish B'Av, I think that would be a huge wake up call for a lot of folks, especially the Orthodox and ultra Orthodox in Israel. That would be a red flag for them, that here is this Gentile church that is suddenly removed. All these people have disappeared from the earth on Tish B'Av, and they're going to look at that and like, okay, that's significant, because you and I today, like, I don't say you and I, like Americans, Westerners, whatever, we do hold dates, some dates significant, right? So 9/11 obviously would be a significant date that happened. Um, and if something happens on 9/11, like a 9/11 in the future, we would recognize, hey, that there's something to this date that the enemy likes to attack us on. Just like October 7th was the 50th anniversary since the Yom Kippur War. Um, the fact that the other cultures, non-Western cultures, hold those dates way more in higher esteem than we do. Um, I think the fact that if the church was raptured on a Tish B'Av, that would be a very big wake up call for Israel and cause them to start looking. And then on top of that, you would have the Gog and Magog conflict, which I think happens after the rapture, and everything that would follow. But I do think that would start to wake up the Jewish people in that prophetic sense. I think now, October 7th, 2023 was a wake up call in a national sense. I think the next thing that may happen would be the wake up on the spiritual sense. The valley of dry bones, the bones have come together. They've got the sinews, they've got the muscle, the skin's coming on, but they don't have the breath of life in them. They don't have that spirit in them. And that may be something that begins to trigger or happens to them when the rapture happens. That breath may come in. And some of the Jewish people were like, whoa, all the Messianic Jews that we were making fun of and spitting on and throwing rocks at and everything, and giving a hard time, they're all gone. And I think that would be a huge wake up call. Now, that's just a theory. That's just my opinion. That I don't know if the rapture is going to happen on Tish B'Av. I like it because in my mind it makes sense, and there's a cause and there's an effect. Cause effect, and we could see how that would affect the Jewish people, especially those that are practicing Judaism, would be a wake up call, because they are very, very conscientious of this day. You know, the Tish B'Av is, I mean, they lost both temples on those days. There's been the days when they've been expelled from England, from Spain, from the pogroms and all the things the terrible things that have happened to them. I think the final solution was written or signed or made into effect or law on Tish B'Av, unbeknownst to the Jews, and but we can look back at the date and say, oh, that lines up with this. So I don't know. What do you think about Tish B'Av as a potential rapture date? And you don't have to agree with me. I
Well,
like it because it makes sense to me.
first of all, I want to acknowledge that you're not basing this off emotions. I love that. I love that you're picking a date because you're thinking things through logically. I really like that. So your favorite day out of the year is Tish B'Av, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, for a rapture scenario. My favorite day of the year is Feast of Weeks for a rapture scenario, which is Shavuot, which I believe, I know there's a lot of people that believe that Pentecost is Tish B'Av or whatever. I'm not in that camp. So there's a group of people that think that Pentecost is in the 5th month on the Jewish calendar. I've been through this gamut like 3 years in a row with trying to sort this out. Is Pentecost really when Shavuot is, and all that? I'm in the camp that Pentecost is actually Shavuot in the 3rd month. And so, and my favorite day is, but I'd like to call it Feast of Weeks because, I mean, there's many names for it. Shavuot, Pentecost. I think in the Talmud it calls it the Feast of Conclusion or something like that. But for my sake, call it the Feast of Weeks in the 3rd month. I'll give you the 5-minute explanation why I like it. I like it the best. I mean, I can talk about this for a long time. But Ruth is the 8th book in the Old Testament Bible. There's 2 female books in the Old Testament. There's Ruth and there's Esther. If you read Esther, and really there's an idea of, Jesus calls himself the bridegroom, and there's these, what is this whole event, and Jesus talks about the church and the mystery of the church. The church is essentially the bride, but it's not like we're actually brides. Or it's not like we're really lampstands. We're not salt, but the Bible tells us these things. But there's this idea of there's going to be a wedding and there's going to be a childbirth. There's this wedding and there's just childbirth. Really, the big 2 themes for rapture typology is wedding stuff and birth stuff. Well, what happens in Ruth? Ruth is a Moabite, and Ruth is the book that's read on Feast of Weeks in the evening of it. And she's a Moabite. She's a Gentile. She marries a kinsman redeemer. And then what happens? They have a child. And so there's a birth. So there's a marriage in Ruth, and there's a birth in Ruth. And her name, Ruth, if you reverse her name, it's Torah. You put a hey at the end of Ruth, it's behold Ruth. So the Torah, flip it around, means behold Ruth, behold the Gentile bride. And so when you look at the Feast of Weeks, you look at the bread, the 2 wave loaves, it says they're the first fruits. It says they're the first fruits. And Romans 8 talks about us we're waiting for our redemption of our bodies as the first fruits. I'll read that verse. And it says, I'll go Romans 8:20. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope, because the creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groans and labors with birth pains together until now. Not only that, but we also, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption and the redemption of our body. So it says that, but we also, who have the first fruits of the Spirit. Well, if you go to Leviticus 23:17, it says first fruits there. 23:17 says the wave loaves are first fruits. So we're waiting for the adoption of our bodies in Romans 8, which is the word first fruits there. And then Leviticus 23:17, it says, you shall bring from your dwellings 2 wave loaves of 2/10 of an ephah. You shall be with fine flour. They shall be baked with leaven. They are the first fruits to the Lord. So when there's a harvest, there's always going to be a first fruit offering to the Lord. There's got to be the first batch, in other words, And when you go back to a few verses before that, Leviticus 23 verse 9, it's talking about the first fruits. Well, that's the time when Christ was presented to God. So Jesus is our first fruit. 1 Corinthians 15 talks about that as well. Since he went, there's going to be a harvest after him. But I believe that the rapture church is also the first fruit harvest of humanity in general. And so Leviticus 23, the center feast is a one-day feast, and that happens to fall on Feast of Weeks. And those wave loaves, I believe, is the Jew and the Gentile being presented to God as first fruits, as the creme of the cream. What's that saying? The cream of the crop. The cream of the crop.
Creme de la creme.
Creme de la creme. The icing on the cake, the cherry on the ice cream. That's at the raptured group, and I believe that those two wave loaves is everything. I believe that because Jesus at the Last Supper, before he died, he said, "This bread represents my body, and this cup represents my blood." So that means the bread represents body, and we are the body of Christ. All right. So, and he is the head, and we are the body. So the bread is the body, and so that's the mystery of the church. We're the body of Christ. We're the bread of Jesus, and so that you make this bread in your house and you present it to the Lord, the body of Christ. Not only do you wave these wave loaves, but you also wave it with two lambs. We can't enter the kingdom without the blood of the lamb covering us. And so there's so many things that I can say on this, but I absolutely love the typology of Feast of Weeks this year. And that Hebrew word for first fruits is different than the Hebrew word for first fruits when Jesus rose from the grave. And that word is tied to childbirth, Bikar. It's tied to childbirth. And what are we waiting for? We're waiting for the child to be born. That's us. That's the rapture, in my opinion. It's a childbirth. Jeremiah 30, we read that. It's like a woman in labor. That's what's going on here. There's so many Old Testament scriptures. We could probably pull up like 20 right now that it's talking about. It's a woman in travail. It's childbirth. Well, this first fruit Hebrew word in Feast of Weeks is related to childbirth, bringing forth the firstborn. And we are that firstborn. And there's laws that can't be broken. And I think it's Exodus 13 talks about how the firstborn are mine. They're mine. And again, I think we're Exodus 13 verse 1. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever opens the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and beast, it is mine." So again, I think we're the firstborn of humanity in general on Rapture Day, and that bread represents it. There's codes as well in the Bible with the Hebrew. I don't know if you know that pattern with every 50 letters in Genesis it spells Torah, and every 50 letters in Exodus it spells Torah. And in reverse it's behold Ruth and stuff like that. And one final thought on this, and that is the Feast of Weeks is like a mini jubilee. It's the way that you count to Feast of Weeks, it's the exact same way you would count to a yearly jubilee. A yearly jubilee, you count 7 weeks, seven cycles of 7, and then on the 50th year, it's a jubilee. It's a time of release. It's a time of redemption. It's a time of restoration, redemption, and all that. Well, you use that same math and you apply it to the Feast of Weeks. So Feast of Weeks is a mini jubilee. It's not like a year thing, but it's like a 50-day count. And there's no other feast where you count 50 days to get to it. All the other ones, they just happen when they happen, and that's it. But this one, God says, count for yourself 50 days. And on the 50th day, that's your big day. And then there's all these sacrifices and all these things that are mentioned in 23. And so that's some of many reasons why I like the Feast of Weeks the most. But I like how you are like, you're trying to pick a date non-emotionally. I love that. I would love the Rapture community to do that. I would challenge everybody to try and come to your favorite day of the year that makes the most sense and be able to explain why you think that is. Don't just pick a day that's 2 weeks in front of you because it feels good. That's like more of an emotional way to analyze things. Well, I'm just going to pick January 10th today because on some random calendar, something random completely happened, and I just want to have hope for January 10th. That's fine, but let's just be a little more, I don't know, scholarly about this. and not emotional. So that's my perspective, you know. So I know I was talking a
God
lot.
doesn't do
Any
random.
response to that? With that?
So God doesn't do random.
Yeah.
But hey, were you the one talking about how Ruth didn't nurse Obed? She gave the baby to Naomi, and then Naomi nursed Obed, and then you don't hear from Ruth again. She's gone, like
Yeah. So yeah,
gone
isn't
from
that
the
amazing? So
storyline.
the last time you see the mention of Ruth is when it says Boaz took Ruth. That's the last mention, and that's in Ruth 4:13. And then you get into this genealogy, and here's the other just incredible thing. In Genesis 38 is the story of Judah and Tamar. You know, Tamar played the harlot, and she ended up getting pregnant from Judah. There's a whole story there. But at the end of Ruth, it says here in 4:12, "May your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah." I mean, that's a weird thing to say. You know, why would you tell Boaz, "May your house be like the harlot"? Like Perez was the son of the harlot, right? So what's going on here? That's a weird. Is this a toast or is this an insult? You know, what's going on? So they're referring us back to Genesis 38. 38. Well, because that's the chapter of Tamar. Well, in Genesis 38, every 49 letters, it spells the name of Boaz and Ruth and Obed and Jesse and David. Every single person's in the order of the chronology in the Hebrew letters. It spells out their names every 49 letters. Everybody's name's spelled backwards down the chapter in sequential order. This was written 500 years like before the time of Ruth. So obviously God has got a hand on this. But not only is it written 500 years before, it's written in 49 letter steps. Well, what's the day count for Feast of Weeks? It's 49 letters. I mean, it's 49 days. And then on the 50th day, whammo. So I think that's just so awesome. It's like that's a code. And I learned that from Chuck Missler, and I was able to highlight that and present that
I don't
in.
subscribe to the I don't subscribe really to the Bible code, but I do think the Bible does have code in there in terms of like the names you just mentioned in terms of Ruth, and you go on from Ruth down to David, as well as or Boaz to David, and then you see in what is it, Genesis 5, how the names you take the Adam means man, and Methuselah you mentioned earlier, his death shall bring. You can know that there's a message encoded in that. So I think there's cool things like that in there. I don't think I guess there was a book that came out in the 90s and they were trying to find like Saddam Hussein or
Yeah.
9/11.
No.
Like I don't subscribe to that stuff. Like, but I
No,
do
me
think
neither.
that within the pattern that shows the scarlet cord of from Adam all the way to Christ, I think that you start to see that play out in probably there's probably so many different ways that things are going to be made known to us on the other side of the rapture. Like I had no idea. I looked at that passage all the time. I never knew, you know, just because it it's the Holy Spirit's got to move that on you. Now, the second thing I was going to ask you about now. I agree with you. I think right now we are in spiritual utero, so to speak, and the church wasn't born at Acts 2. It was conceived in Acts 2, just as the same when the Holy Spirit overshadowed Mary when the angel Gabriel came and said, "Hey, you're going to bear this. Basically, you're going to bear the Messiah." Uh, the Holy Spirit came and overshadowed her. She didn't give birth right then and there. She went through the normal 9-month gestation period for the normal birthing cycle, the 3 trimesters, right? And the Holy Spirit overshadowed, in a way, the church on Acts chapter 2, and that spread. And we've been growing as this. We are the body of Christ. Paul talks about it in, I think, 1 Corinthians 13, in terms of the body. We represent different body parts and things because we have different callings and giftings and things like that. But we all are like this mosaic that God has been building over the last 2,000 years, and we make up the body of Christ. So we are the body of Christ singularly, but also corporately. You know, there's a bunch of us Christians for the last 2,000 years, but we all make one body, and Christ is the head. We are the body. And so Christ, obviously the firstborn among man, or among us, the brethren. And then we will come and join him at the pre-tribulation rapture of the church, which happens prior to the 70th week. Now, man, I just lost my thought. I was going to ask you this one thing. Okay, let me go into something else, because then it'll come back. So
Let me just
I did.
explain, if you don't,
Good,
if you don't
good.
mind. Let me just do like 2 minutes, because some people are saying Bible codes are weird, and I want to explain. I don't do the weird Bible code stuff that, like, Saddam was saying, like you said. I just really highlight the word, like Yahweh, for example. So let me just show you one cool thing. Are you aware of that the Torah thing? Every 50 letters that spells Torah in Genesis 1:1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're aware of that.
I've heard of
So
it
let me
before.
just let me just show you the one basic thing here. Like, I don't go wild with this. I don't try and predict anything, but God did this on purpose. Let me see if I can clarify this. Is this clear? There we go. So that's a Tav. Okay. 50 letters later, it's a Vav. 50 letters later, it's a Resh. 50 letters later, it's a Hey. So that spells Torah. And backwards, that's behold Ruth. That's in Genesis 1 from the first word of the Bible. So if you go to Exodus chapter 1, it does the exact same thing. Exact same thing. It spells Torah every 50 letters. And so for me, this is so cool, because this is God writing the end from the beginning. So I'm just highlighting how cool God is. There's your Tav. 50 letters later, there's your Vav. 50 letters later, there's a Resh. 50 letters later, there's a Hey. That spells Torah. And backwards, that's behold Ruth. In Numbers chapter 1, it spells Torah, but this time it does it backwards. It's a Hey, and then it's a Resh, then it's a Vav, and then it's a Tav. So now it's pointing backwards. It's in 50 letter skips in Numbers chapter 1. It does the same thing in Deuteronomy. And so what is it trying to do? It's trying to point to something or someone. In Leviticus, this is the name of God right here. And this is Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. That's the name for Lord. And that's an 8-letter skip. And so Genesis and Exodus spell Torah this way, and Deuteronomy and Numbers spell Torah backwards, pointing to Leviticus, the center book in the Pentateuch in the Torah, and it spells Yahweh, which is behold the hand, behold the nail. I don't know if it's getting blurry here, but Yod means hand, and a Hey means behold, and Vav is a nail. So come on now, camera, let's go. There you go. That's a nail, and then that's a Hey over here. So what's going on with the Bible is the Torah is pointing to Jesus, Yahweh, the man who died for our sins. Behold the hand, behold the nail. So I don't do this to try and find out the next president. I do this to say God is real, and this book is real, and it's written by no other than the Creator himself. And so when I say Bible code, I present those kinds of things. Like, that's just so cool. Like, for me, this built my faith big time, when I'm like, wow, look at this pattern. A man couldn't have done this. So anyway, yeah.
That's things like that are done by God he's putting his signature in there, showing that this is not merely a man-made book. Same with prophecy, same with the typology, the patterns, all that stuff authenticates the word over and over and over in so many different directions. The Quran can't do that. The Book of Mormon, the Pearl of Great Price, the Hindu Vedas, whatever, you pick your pagan text or whatever. None of those other books can do that. Even any one of those things, but God is doing this over and over. So I would imagine that if God is going to show, and I haven't studied this out at all, I just thought about this right this second, but there, in my mind, if 7 is a representation of perfection, then there's going to be 7 types of witnesses that we see that are not speaking to what the message is saying, but things surrounding all of that, like the typology, the pattern, the code of God in there. You know what I mean? And there would be other things in there, and I don't know what the rest of those things are, and I've not studied this out. It's something I'm going to do. But it seems interesting to me that God would also embed within the scripture. He would embed in here his signature, his authority, just like he did it on the city of Jerusalem, where you have that letter. I guess the city of Jerusalem, the way the terrain is, it forms the letter or whatever. And God's doing that through so many things. So people will keep running out of excuses why they don't turn to God, and they'll have to crawl over the cross. They'll have to crawl over God's free gift of salvation to jump into the lake of fire on their own accord, right? Because God is going to have all these proofs here. He's got proofs in creation. The idea of a first cause. You have to have a first cause if you have a big bang or whatever. So what's the first cause of that? What caused the bang? What caused the material to automatically just explode spontaneously out of nothing? But how did nothing explode and create everything? And then not only create everything, but put order in laws, the laws of physics and the laws of gravity, etc., throughout the universe. How did all that happen? I think there's probably proofs of seven throughout every facet of creation, from the times, the ages that we live in, down to like the molecular level, down to the atomic level. I'm sure that this may not be things that we even see this side of the rapture. This may be things that happen on the other side of the rapture, once we're in our glorified forms and we have that the mind. We're up there with God and He's explaining these things to us. But there's so many cool things. Hey, do you have a little time to do some Q&A?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and while people
I
are
don't know where
asking
you
some
are.
questions.
Yeah, and my moderators, I don't know if you guys have sent them into the Discord. I generally get them on Discord. Let's see.
I was going to say too, while you're doing whatever, the Shin is the letter that you're talking about in Jerusalem. There's the three valleys there. It looks like a Shin, like a W almost, and that could easily represent the signature of God, the name of God. El Shaddai has that Shin in it, and Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and it says in many places in the Old Testament, I'll put my name in Jerusalem, and even in the rocks, it's got like Yod Hey Vav Hey, like in the rocks in certain areas, and he certainly has put his fingerprint and his name in the land, in the scope there.
How are you on time? Do you want to just do like right at say 2 hours and 30 minutes, or 3 hours, 5 hours? I don't want to do 5 hours. I'm just kidding. But like, where are you at? I mean, do you have a hard time where you got to stop or whatever?
Well, I've got my sleeping bag here, and so no, it doesn't matter, man. There's nothing really pressing.
My tribe will start growing restless here shortly if I don't get them doing into something. All right, let's see. If you have a question, just put it in as question real big. Thank you, Isaiah 53. Thank you, Vindog. Thank you, Black Swan. Sorry if I missed anybody's super chats. Thank you, guys. Yeah, if you have questions, just put question real big, and then Titus is going to answer all of your questions. Oh, here we go. Cindy R. Let's put this on the screen. All right, you want to read it?
Is Titus going to read it?
I was laying down and my pants went up like
Oh. Read it, Titus. Can you read it? Right here.
Question: What are your thoughts about if a peace agreement is reached in the Middle East?
So what for you? I guess she's asking what would for you would be like, man, that is red flag. Let's go. This is star clusters are shooting out.
Yeah. Actually, this is a kind of a big deal because so who's the Antichrist? Well, nobody really knows. Everybody's got their opinion. Who's a really great candidate too is MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. So he's the leader of Saudi Arabia, and he's in control of two of the big Islamic hotspots for Mecca is there, and what's the other place called? I forget now. But
Medina.
Anyway, was it
Medina?
That sounds right.
Mecca and Medina.
Yeah. Okay. So him and Macron are working on a two-state solution right now. I mean, they're always talking about it, but it looks like it's really in the works. And they want to have a final agreement in June in New York. They want to sign this final thing June 2nd through June 4th in New York, a potential actual two-state solution. Looks like they're already starting the phases now as we speak in direction towards that date. They're trying to do it in phases. And that is one thing that we're really looking at. And that they said it could be a 7 to 10 year project. It's amazing how there's a 7 in there. I personally think whoever the Antichrist is, I think that he will be Muslim or Islamic in nature. The Quran is the opposite of the book of Revelation. They expect everything in the opposite that we do. So, yeah. So I think it's interesting that it looks like there might be something in June. We'll see what happens as things progress toward that date.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at, in terms of just peace agreements, I'm looking at the Abraham Accords, obviously. I don't know specifically what about that. We'll wait and see. But the one thing I do know is that had Harris won the election, I mean, Israel would not enter into some kind of that agreement with the United States because they don't trust the Democrats. They don't trust Biden, and they don't trust him as far as they can throw him. So I don't think there was any kind of real, especially if Netanyahu stayed in power there as a prime minister. But with Trump coming in and his long history with Netanyahu, I mean, they've been friends for decades. And the whole success they had with the normalization process in his first term, I think if that comes back here in the second term, um, I don't know. I mean, it to me, there's something that may grow out of that. But yeah, the BRICS is another thing for me that looking at it, they are trying to create an alternative to the world's current reserve currency. And I don't know that the United States would allow that to proceed any further than it's already gone. But I don't know if the BRICS end up making the 10 kings or what that ends up looking like. But yeah, the fact that they put 7 into some of these agreements is pretty interesting to me. I think that there's thank you, Coco. I think there is I think what's fascinating, I don't subscribe to a Muslim Antichrist, but I just had this thought the other day that what would happen, just like today, we're just doing this and then we go into the weekend. But what if some guy appeared in the Middle East and said, I'm the Mahdi? What if some guy just came forth and said, we have criteria on who the Antichrist is going to be based on scripture, right? We find his descriptions in Daniel 7, Daniel 8, what is it, Daniel 10 or 11, and then Revelation 13, 2 Thessalonians 2. All throughout the Bible, there's little bits and pieces about this coming Antichrist and things that he would foreshadow. But what if we aren't really up to speed on Islamic eschatology? What if some guy, whether he was or wasn't, just claiming to be the Antichrist or claiming to be the Mahdi or whoever, rise up in the Middle East? Like, how would we react on Monday if this were to happen? Because for them, Friday is their Sunday, so they do their mosque stuff on Fridays. The Jews do their worship on Saturdays, and the Christians do it on Sunday. So Saturday is their first day of the week for the Islamic world, and then Sunday is like like their Tuesday. But what if Monday this Mahdi character pops up in the news, and he is claiming to be the Mahdi, right? So we've lived in the last 2,000 years, roughly, the age of the Gentiles. That goes back to the time of Nebuchadnezzar. But like, if we just look at the modern, the AD time period, Anno Domini time period, from the first century till today, we've lived in this age where it's increasingly becoming secular and naturalistic. We've moved away from supernatural. We've moved away from Christians and the Christian church in the West has moved away from the supernatural nature of the Bible to they've kind of dimmed it down or diminished it down to just like a book of history or a book of ethics or something, that's malleable. And I don't really think that Jesus said it here. And you get these red letter Christians, and you get all these people that come out in different theories and try and put their philosophical spin upon something. Well, we're coming back into this time, at least since Israel's been back in the land, where supernatural things are beginning to happen. Or, I call it paranormal or preternatural, whatever you want to call it. It's not normal. It's not natural. It falls outside of the realm of the naturalistic worldview. So whether you're talking about spaceships in the sky, or you're talking about increase, the exponential increase in the of not ghosts, but like spirits and those kinds of haunted things, and the occult. And we're entering this time when we're coming back into the spiritual or supernatural realm. And I long believed that the world would go on the day before the rapture would be kind of like how it is today, but the day after would be supernatural. It'd go from normal to paranormal, would go from natural to supernatural, would go from normal to abnormal. Like the world's going to change and flip on its head on inside of the 70th week. We know there's going to be a ton of supernatural things happening. But what if some guy came out on Monday and said, "Hey, I'm the Mahdi," and he seems
Yeah.
like he has all the credentials? How do
Yeah.
we react? And we're like, wait a minute, we're sitting here waiting for the rapture, and this guy's popping up over here claiming to be the Mahdi. Like, how would
Yeah.
we? It would be like the devil to do something like that to throw us off our game. So I've never really thought about it before. Like, I know they have a Mahdi that they're looking for him to come, but what if on Monday somebody's in the news like he is the Mahdi? He claims to be the Mahdi and he could do certain things or whatever, and we're still here. Not again, I don't subscribe that he is the Antichrist, because I think that the Antichrist has got to come from within the realm of the Roman Empire somewhere because of Daniel 9:26. But he could be Assyrian, he could be Kurdish, he could be part of the Druze or some other kind of little weird sect of Islam that's not in the majority, yet he's got the bona fides of both the Islamic world as well as some connections, ties to the Jewish people. Like the Kurds and the Jewish people are both have a shared they have a lot of things in common because they've been so persecuted by the majority of people in the areas in which they lived. And the Kurds are pretty different from your normal Sunnis. The Druze are kind of different from the normal Shia because they embrace other things other than Islam. They embrace like a little bit of Buddhism, a Hinduism, etc. Some of the Eastern philosophical leanings. But what if it were somebody like that, and he says, "Well, just so happens that my grandmother is Jewish," or he has some kind of connection, So it's not outside of the realm of possibility. I've always kind of looked at him as like Romanian or Italian or whatever. So
Hmm.
I could be wrong. I'm not claiming to know, and my opinion, we can't know who he is specifically until after the rapture happens. But what
Well,
would you
yeah.
do? What would you do on Monday if
Yeah.
somebody claimed that?
Well, a couple pieces of basic information, because a lot of us Christians don't read the Quran, so we're really completely oblivious to a lot of the things. So they believe that they're going to behead people in the end times. Well, the Bible says
Mm-hmm.
that the tribulation saints will be beheaded. They also believe in a 7-year period, but it's the opposite of us. They believe that Jesus is going to come back, but he's going to come back and clarify that you guys were all wrong. I'm not God. I'm just a nice guy. They believe all these things. They believe that the whole world will become Muslim. And you got to remember too, look at all the nations that surround Israel. Like they're all Muslim. They're all Islamic in nature in some way, shape, or form. They're all like that. Like we have to take our North American brains off for a second and realize once we're gone, it's all about Israel and the surrounding nations. It's all about Israel and Muslims and Islam. And so also on Rapture Day, the main religion of this world, or I should say the main faith system, is Christianity. And when on Rapture Day, what's going to be the strongest religion? It's going to be Muslims. It's going to be Islamic. They are going to be number one. So whoever this Antichrist is going to be, even if he's not Muslim, he really has to cater to the Muslim community. He has to, because that's going to be the strongest influence and structure in and around surrounding Israel. I mean, they want to kill Israel. Iran wants to kill Israel. There's this hatred. There's a spiritual hatred towards it, and it's not every Muslim is a bad person. Don't get me wrong. But there's this opposing theme and story through the Quran that is the exact opposite of ours. Like the exact opposite. The false prophet, the everything. Like they got all these names for what we would call the false prophet. They got, I forget, I think it's called the Jadil or something like that. It's been a while now since I've studied it, but their whole theme is the opposite of ours. And there's no other religion that I'm aware of that has the opposite theme of ours. Their book of Revelation is basically flipped backwards in a way. They don't have a book of Revelation, but you know what I'm saying? Like their theme is the put a mirror to it. That's what they are expecting. So I'm of the belief that if he's either going to be Muslim or he's going to really ride on the coattails of that faith system, and he's really going to cater to them. So we'll see.
The
So if somebody
Muslim
shows up
thing,
and says I'm the Antichrist or I'm the Mahdi, I'm like, whoa, okay, you know, you got my attention.
we also live in a time period which is oddly enough, where so much of what we consider reality can be faked and can be deep faked, can be manipulated, and so it's getting harder and harder to know what's real and what's not real, especially when it comes to things online or whatever. But even if you look at the holographic technology that we have, and the artificial intelligence, and now we've got this quantum level AI through Willow. I think it's just going to be a blending of that technology with also the supernatural. So whatever the image of the beast is that seems to come to life, I tend to think that demonic entities are going to inhabit these machines or things and make them seem like they're alive, but really they're demonic spirits, in indwelling those statues or idols or whatever, and they're able to trick people into, or deceive people into thinking that it's some kind of real sentient thing. Same with artificial intelligence. And hey, John, I don't think you're the Antichrist, man. I meant to. I know I said Romanian and Italian. I don't. I don't hold that the Antichrist has to be that. I think that's what he was in the Left Behind series. I think he was like Romanian, or they picked some like country they could get away with saying that. But let's see here. This one is on my Discord. It says Acts 17:31, judgment, rapture, starting around the same time? Question mark. So Acts 17:31. Let me look over. Let me start in verse 30. Truly, these times of ignorance God overlooked, but now commands all men everywhere to repent. Verse 31, because he has appointed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness by the man whom he has ordained. And the man in this is capitalized. He has given assurance to this to all by raising him from the dead. So no, I think this is about Jesus Christ and not about the Antichrist. Now, as far as it goes in terms of the day, appointed to a day. So I know people, for me, like I've been writing, talking about prophecy since 2011, and I've never come out and said, oh, it's going to be this, blah, blah, blah. I've simply looked at here recently, probably within the last few years, since we've come into the 2020s, like, hey, this is kind of the time that I've always been looking at anyways. So it's interesting to me that it'd be one thing if I didn't have this kind of perspective until 2024 or 2023 or 2022, because that would seem a little bit disingenuous of me. But I've been holding to this view since 2011, and the article that's in the show notes, and you guys, that was the main article that impacted me, and it was probably around the time of 2009. And Don goes through a ton of different time-based prophecies and looking at everything and just trying to take it into perspective. And he puts his notes at the bottom, like, hey, this just seems what the most likely average, and the average being somewhere between 2025 and 2040, somewhere in that area, for the second coming, not the rapture.
So that article was written in 2009.
2007.
Oh, and he said that he was going to edit it and stuff. Did he edit it, or did he just always keep it that way?
I think the main, because I read it in 2009, and he's probably tweaked some things in there in terms of like adding prophecies that have come to light.
So most of those main dates he didn't change, and he wrote that in 2009.
No.
So
In fact, he's been Don has been. I know he's still alive, but I think somewhere it's been a few years he's not been writing because he's had really bad medical problems and stuff. So he's maybe been doing like one article a year.
Yeah.
For the last 2 or 3 years. So even before that, he had slowed down considerably because he was having all these health issues. And he honestly just like, I didn't think I was going to be alive this long, like, because his problems were so severe. But yeah, that article's largely stayed unchanged since 2007.
Okay, that makes it much more interesting. Yeah, I read it before I got on the live stream because you sent that earlier, and I'm like, just wanted to have a basic understanding. So yeah, he was saying that, yeah, it looks like the second coming would, he said 95% chance it would happen by, I think 2033 or something like that. He said something like that, based on the data, and and I like it. And so, did you also say that you personally yourself as well were looking at this window of time for the last 10 years? Is that what you were kind of saying as well?
Yeah, about 11, more than that, 14 years now or so, 13, 14 years.
You've always been looking to this kind of time period. So this has got to be an exciting time for you too. Like for me, like I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't watching like until 2020. You know, I was a Christian my whole life, but I just knew no, infrastructure's not there yet. Something else has to be in place. No. I just didn't bother looking. I mean, I went to church. I was always a Christian. I was saved as a child. Very aware of the evil in this world. I was very aware that about a lot of things, which I won't say on YouTube, but went down the rabbit hole and a lot of avenues there. So I had my goggles on. I had a good perspective of things, but then it was 2020 when things really like, okay, now I got to figure this out. Now we're in the season, boom, and let's go. So I've been sort of new to all this, but that's cool that you were looking to this time a long time ago. That's cool.
Yeah, and I grew up in I grew up in writing prophecy wise. My mentor was a guy named Jack Kinsella, who took me under his wing. Because when I first came back into the faith, and I shared with you my story yesterday, it was about 2010, 2011, or somewhere in that time period when I found the Omega letter. Because at the time I didn't know what I believed. I wasn't in any particular position. I was teetering between pre-wrath and pre-trib, and I wasn't dogmatic either way. But Jack Kinsella had been the show writer, screenwriter for Hal Lindsey for 10 years, and then he started the Omega letter back in 2000 or maybe 2001. And so by the time I came along, that website had been well established. Hold on real quick.
Yeah, no problem. Dog barking.
So it was about 2011 when I came on to the Omega letter, but that website had been around for 10 years already, so they're well established. And he was very, he never talked about the timing. It was, kind of a taboo topic and so privately we would talk about these things. Privately, most of your prophecy teachers today, I don't, no matter how big they are, talk about what they think personally. They don't want to go out on a limb and say anything publicly because unlike, for example, like, and I'm not, there's nothing against Andy Woods. He's just the first guy that came to mind. But he's tied to a church. He's tied to a ministry. He's got a board of directors, I'm sure. He's got elders. He's got a congregation that he's beholden to. So if he goes off the rails and starts talking about crazy things, his congregation's going to hold him accountable. You know what I mean? Like, and they may fire him. There's a lot of things that could happen. Sort of some of that stuff we're seeing, for example, and this is a completely different subject I may talk about sometime, maybe with Vindog on Monday. But like Daystar, having a lot of drama with Daystar, with Joni Lamb, and you get to hear the audio behind the scenes where Jimmy Evans is talking with Joni, and then the son and the daughter-in-law, and it's like soap opera drama, like, and they're swearing, and it's crazy. But my point is that being kind of like independent contractors out here on the internet in terms of operating in a ministry, a website ministry, YouTube, where we're talking about eschatology, we're talking about apologetics, we're talking about geopolitics, church history, and that's my kind of wheelhouse, right? I had a good mentor, and he kept me pretty grounded throughout the years. And I didn't go on YouTube. I didn't go on YouTube until about 2020, 2021. I didn't even know. I knew there was like JD Farag and there was like Jan Markell, some of the really big names. And that's all I listened to. I had no idea there were guys like Tyler or Barry Scarborough, anybody else. I didn't even know this side of the prophecy world existed. So it was all new to me, getting onto YouTube, and I resisted getting my own channel for a long time. And eventually I'd done so many interviews. I was like, where am I going to put all these like interviews and stuff? And so eventually I started my own channel, but I tried to keep that same self-discipline in terms of like not chasing after all these different rabbits and stuff. And I think people have come to respect that. And I don't, But now that I'm sitting here and we're kind of in this time frame where I've always looked at going back to 2009, I'm excited, man. Like I'm not saying I didn't set the Final Four with Tyler. I didn't set it because we were in that time. I set it a long time ago, way back, from Don Koenig's article. It had that kind of impact on me. I read through it. I don't know how many times I read through it, and I was looking through all the different prophecies, and I was like, yeah, I can't really disagree with his math, and I can't disagree with how the logic that he's bringing to this, because I tend to think it's right. And he wasn't saying in 2007, hey, I think it's in 2008, because it's right around the corner. He could have made money that way. He could have made a name for himself. No, he's like, I think it's like way off here. And I'm telling you, it was not a popular message to come out and say in 2009 and 10, 11, hey, I think it's in the 2030s. Actually, he was not well liked at all for coming out and saying that. But he's proven to be right.
Right. And one little fun thing on that note is Chuck Missler was kind of like, he actually pointed a little bit further than what we're talking about. I think he even said, well, I'm not a guy that talks about dates that much, but I think he pointed to like 2040 being the second coming or something like that. I don't know why, but and then he also said, my favorite feast if I had to pick, this is how he said it. If I had to pick a rapture date, I would pick the Feast of Weeks. So Chuck Missler's favorite feast for a rapture, it would be Feast of Weeks. I agree with him. And, but that's cool. Like he just, the cool thing about Chuck Missler, completely unemotional, very logical, very aware of the prophecies, amazing teacher. And we can all glean from that kind of a perspective and an attitude. So in this rapture community, I just want everybody to grow a bit more and mature a little bit more, and a little bit less sensational, and let's understand the word together collectively. And go slower, think bigger,
So I have two questions here. One is from Doris Truitt, and I don't understand the question. It says, question about when witness, question. And then the other one is from Dora. She's asking, question is the connection between the ID globalization and two-state solution. I don't know what ID globalization means, but here's a thought. And I did this on Monday, I think last Monday. I went through like Chat GPT, and I had to put in all the parameters for it. But I said, hey, hypothetically, if you had to set up a system where people had to have technology embedded in their hand or their forehead, why the hand in the forehead? And also, how would that happen given the current constraints today? So the chat goes through all the internet, pulls everything together, and then it presents what it would do so this is an AI system saying, hey, this is how I would do the mark of the beast. But I didn't call it the mark of the beast. I just, was saying, hey, if the current global currency collapsed, if the US dollar collapsed, and we had to go to a digital currency, what would that look like? What would the logistics of that look like? Why the hand, why the forehead, all through that. And so I read through all that, and it's frightening to think about how close we are, because we're there. I mean, we're there. All that we're waiting on right now is for the US to collapse, or for the dollar to collapse. And what that would necessitate is a digital currency, as well as, because it would be so disruptive to the global economy, probably some kind of universal basic income, some UBI, which then necessitates a global ID. And all of that stuff would be digital. And eventually that would be packaged into a little thing like this that would go in your hand or your forehead, probably feeding nanobots throughout your body, etc. And by the time you get to the bowl judgments and at the end of the tribulation, nanobots they're talking now that they've created, they exist right now. They're actually trying them out in Europe. These self-replicating RNA, oh gosh, I didn't mean to say that, nanobots that self-replicate inside of the body. Well, the nanobots, when they self-replicate, they have to have fuel to do that. And what is the fuel? The fuel is the body. So what if God does something with the bowl judgment that triggers that thing in the mark, and those nanobots go nuts and they begin to eat the flesh? Well, what happens is you start having these grievous sores, pus, all of that stuff from these nanobots that have to self-replicate. In order to self-replicate, they got to eat. What do they eat? They eat the person. They eat the host that's on them, or that they're in. Anyways, another story. I don't want to. That's another hour.
Yeah, that's wild stuff. Yeah.
Here's a
I feel
Okay,
bad for
Dora.
John Lett there. The guy's comment, he's still there underneath us. Maybe just remove that guy's.
Sorry, John. Let's see. How do I remove this off? I have to go back to his name and find it. Let's see. All right, I'm gonna put Bubba News on. There you go, Bubba. I like that. Dora said, question, will the U.S., Mexico, and Canada become one region in the last times of the 10 kingdoms? What do you think? I obviously I have my opinions, but what do you think?
Okay, so going back to, here's a little curveball thought in Revelation 13. I know this is not directly answering the question, but I think it's probably fitting because, you said we're waiting for U.S. to fall. And so my perspective is there's two perspectives on Revelation 13. Some people think that there's going to be a mortal, literal head wound for the Antichrist in Revelation 13. My position is that this is actually representing an economic collapse. And so I don't read Revelation 13 as a literal head wound. I believe that head wound probably represents actually the U.S. economy falling and the whole world economy as we know it falling and coming back in the new system. Because it says one of the heads of the beast. And if you read Revelation 17, you understand that the heads of the beast are mountains. 5 have fallen, one is yet to come. So these heads are kingdoms.
Yeah.
They're not physical human beings walking around. They're kingdoms. And so when you read 13, I'll read a couple verses. Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads. So this beast has 7 heads, but the 7 heads are 7 kingdoms. And 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his head a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like feet of a bear, and his mouth were like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast. Okay, so one of these kingdoms is going to fall. That's the way I see it. It's one. Remember, John is seeing visions. He's seeing visions, and it's up to us to understand what these visions are. When we see this harlot riding the beast, there's not this 5 billion pound woman sitting on 7 mountains. That's not what's going on. It's figurative. It's an image of something else. So one of these kingdoms is going to fall, and I believe that's the world economy as we know it. And so the U.S., I guess I'm kind of answering the question. The U.S. right now, everybody, we trade on the U.S. dollar, but that's starting to crumble as we speak. The last 2 years, it's been transitioning to the BRICS. So I think that on Rapture Day, economy is just shot. The U.S. falls in terms of this head wound. That kingdom, that final kingdom, the final structure as we know it. Really, we've been trading on the U.S. dollar for the last what 100 years or something like that. Whatever. So our structure, that is, I believe, what the head wound is, and that ushers in this digital economy. We can already smell it. We can see it. It's already kind of happening. So I don't know if there's going to be enough to answer the question directly based on what I just said. I don't know if there's going to be enough time for Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. to become one thing. I think that we're much closer to this whole U.S. dollar economy crashing before that ends up happening. So that's my answer, I suppose.
I have a question from Pamela Minnick. She wants to know, Aaron, what Bible you're using.
Okay, so actually, Pete and I talked about this before. This hard copy is a New King James Version. I also like this hard copy. This is my amplified. I also like this Greek version, which is that's an ESV Greek interlinear Bible, and the one that I was showing earlier is a Hebrew interlinear Bible. I don't know if you can see it with all the lights flashing on it, but that's an interlinear. I've got a hard copy King James, not in the room with me right now. I've got I don't know. If you want to study things out, and you really, really, really want to understand, if whatever translation you're reading, if you're like, I don't really get it, don't be afraid to read a different translation. Don't be afraid to read commentaries. Don't be afraid to watch videos like these to help you explain certain verses or chapters. or ideas. But if she's just asking directly about the Hebrew one, it's called the Hebrew English Interlinear ESV, Old Testament in particular. So yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. Okay, from Coco, she wants to know thoughts about the drones or the orbs. I mentioned this. This would probably be like the third day. I did it with Tom. I did it with I think I did it on my show, and then I talked a little bit on my show on Monday, and then with Kurt Reed yesterday. I happen to think that some of these sightings are military, secret military programs going on. What they're looking for exactly, I have no idea. Some of them seem to be flying patterns, like they're searching for something, and that's where in places like New Jersey, that's that in some other around the military locations, it seems like they're looking for something, but what they're looking for, they haven't made known yet. There was a supposed radiation, some radiation material that was lost. Apparently, they found the container. You know, they found it. It wasn't that necessarily. We know that Biden and Harris both raced back to the White House last night. What does that mean? I don't know. I guess we'll find out when World War III breaks out or some other thing happens. Um, but I think that there are the military human technology side of it. There are the other things, the orbs that appear to be not metal. They appear to be like, I don't know, spirit kind of things, lights. They float, they change shapes. I mean, it's not anything that I've seen humans can do. They might possibly be some kind of holographic technology. I don't know. And then the other side could be, or the last thing could be that it could be a mix between retrieved crash material from things like Roswell and other places that we've been working on for the last 70 plus years, that we're blending that in with things like quantum computing and the technology inside quantums, and then as well as other artificial intelligence or other things. So maybe a blending of those things. Why they are all appearing now, again, the timing is suspect because we've got the inauguration coming up for the presidential election. We know the deep state does not want Trump in office, so I think between now and then, it's an incredibly dangerous time. The spheres, like these metallic, they look like they're metallic spheres, but then when you look at them under the camera and infrared and other things, they look like spiritual things, like spirit things. One of them even looks kind of like an angel that I saw. And I mean, these things are moving in ways that defy our technology. We don't have the ability to do some of this stuff like transmedium. They could come from space through the sky and then fly into the water, never slowing down. And that's impossible for any of the technology we have presently. That's at least available to be known. But some of these things go back to the 1960s. And it's my beautiful, lovely wife.
Hello.
We've been on for 2 hours.
Been a while.
Almost done. So, love you, babe. And then there's I don't know. This may be multifaceted. It's like, it seems like it's layered. Things are happening on top of each other. So a lot of confusion right now going on. I've listened to all kinds of experts, people that are in the UAV industry, people that are in the psychological operations industry, people in the deep in the military intelligence. You get so many different, there's so many answers coming out. I really don't know what to make of it. I think it's kind of multifaceted. There's multiple things going on right now, and that the purpose that it's confusing is intentional. The confusion is intentional. And I don't know, what do you think about that?
Oh man, yeah, the drone thing. I don't have a great answer for you. I don't study the drone thing out too much. You're the pro on that. You know, I just look at it as throw it in the crazy bin. Just toss it in the crazy bin. I don't know what to make of it. I don't got time for it. It's the end of the world. I expect drones to be flying around and all this crazy stuff in the sky. I just like crazy bin it. Let's get back to reading the Bible. You know, like if somebody was like, nothing phases me, I'm like really desensitized to absolutely anything now. If you were to say there was 50,000 demons flying over the ocean of whatever, I'd be like, okay, sounds right. Sounds about right. You know, I expect just supernatural things. So I haven't even really aggressively looked into it. I'm aware that drones have been spotted. That's about all I know. So because of these
They
things,
had some.
we should be reading the Bible. And you would like, okay, what's going on with the Bible?
Yeah, my wife was coming home last night and she saw some. She saw 3 of them, but apparently the news reported and the law enforcement was reporting 6. But she was driving back from Denton coming this way, and it's a long stretch of country road right there. And she's FaceTiming. I'm looking at him too. I was like, I don't know, man, because I can't. I'm looking through her FaceTime camera through the windshield out into the night sky, trying to like, yeah, that I couldn't see it from my house, but I was like, yeah, that I can't tell what it is, but it sure is. They're all together, and we live pretty close to like the path of where the planes come into DFW, which is a major international airport. So planes will line up over kind of Decatur and come in further if they're landing patterns, whatever landing direction they're going to. So I can recognize those planes. I know what Cessnas, other planes look like, and helicopters, etc. These seem very stationary. So I got a glimpse of it through her camera, but she saw them really good, and then it was on the news. So, man, I don't know. They're doing something. But here's another question. For you, is it possible that God wrote some of the Bible in codes and hidden signs so as not to make his plan clear to Satan? He said knowledge would increase so we could know by studying.
Daniel says that, Daniel, this is not for you. This is for the people at the end. Like, seal it up, and knowledge will go to and fro, and the wise will understand. So I'm in the camp that because the wise will understand. So I think the wise will understand. Like, I'm in the camp that we're gonna figure things out quite aggressively. Like, I'm gonna read that verse properly. Daniel 12, verse 4, but you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. And going down to verse 9, he said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed to the time of the end. Many shall be purified, made white and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. So I'm just going to go real simple with this verse, and I believe the wise will understand. Knowledge has increased. We are in the end times. So yeah, I think God, here's my opinion. I think God wrote the end from the beginning. I think he wrote the timeline, and I think he wrote the rapture date in his Bible. I think he did. That's just my personal opinion. I believe he wrote it either in Hebrew or in English or somehow, and it's just a matter of us trying to figure it out. I feel when we get there, Jesus is going to say, did you catch it in this verse and in this chapter how I did it like this? Did you figure it out? Did you see it? Like, and I hope somebody's going to say, yeah, I saw the pattern or whatever it was, So I'm convinced he wrote it somewhere, the rapture day. That's my perspective.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even if you go into Revelation, when it talks about the 4 angels that are bound under the river Euphrates, they were bound to be released on a certain year, month, and day. That there's a day already set aside for them. So there's already a day fixed that they will be released. So then if you backwards plan from that, we don't know when that date is, but God's already have that time. It's already marked out. But if he has that date marked out, then it stands to reason he has the rapture marked out. He's got everything out, the battle of Gog and Magog. He already knows when that's going to happen, etc. So everything else is going to be, I mean, he's omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient. He sees the end from the beginning all at the same time. I use the parade example all the time. You and I are on the side of the road watching. We're all packed in the crowd. We can only see what passes in front of us. God's the guy in the helicopter 1,000 feet above the parade. He sees the end and the beginning and the middle and everything all at the same time. It's hard for us to. That's the only example for me that makes the most sense. Like you can see everything at the same time. Here's a question. Go to the next question. Okay, almost done. Because I got to go.
Yep.
When will the 2 witnesses come? This is from Doris Truitt. Well, I don't know, but I think by the midpoint they die, right? They have to be killed at the midpoint.
Yeah, and one little point too about the last conversation we were just having. So like the road to Emmaus, like the 2 was it the 2 disciples? They were walking with Jesus. Yeah. They didn't even know it was him. So God temporarily blinds us for some reason. I don't know why, and then he just reveals himself to us. So I think the rapture day is going to be, it's easy. It's probably hidden in plain sight, but he's got blinders on us kind of temporarily, But yeah, going back to the 2 witnesses, I believe they come in the first 3.5 years of the 7 years. That's my perspective, and I think that's another indicator is if we're the tribulation or not. Some people will say, "Oh, because such and such a rapture date passes, therefore we must be in the 7 years." I don't think that's the case. I don't think that we're in the 7 years. I don't think the seals have opened, and I think one big indicator is the two witnesses I believe will be here at the beginning of that 7-year timeline. So if you see two guys blowing fire out of their face and all the things making water turn to blood or whatever it is that they're, then you could be like, okay, all right, maybe we're in tribulation, at that point.
Yeah.
But I don't see two guys running around blowing fire out of their face and doing all these things,
Yeah, I tend to think that they'll show up kind of in the beginning because they're going to help the Jews know exactly where to place the Holy of Holies once the Al-Aqsa Mosque is destroyed at the earthquake at the end of Gog and Magog, or they're destroyed by some errant missile that somebody launches at Israel. You remember when they were launching missiles back in April, and some of those were going over the Temple
Oh, okay.
Mount, and the Jewish people were like videoing it so they could show the rest of the Muslim world, like, hey, the Iranians are just launching missiles this way. Like one of these things could hit your beloved Al-Aqsa Mosque. Apparently, they don't care about it that much. So I tend to think it could be either or, like either the Muslims accidentally destroy it or God destroys it at the end of Gog and Magog. But here's another question for you. Allison, I'm gonna go back to your question in a second. Vicky asked, do you have a book with all your charts and stuff in it? Are you planning on making a book, or do you have one already?
I don't have a book, but I mean, you're the book guy. Maybe I should get your advice or something about writing books and putting things together. But no, I don't have a book. I just do videos. That's all I've done, and made little charts and put them on videos. And I actually should probably start making PDF files of some of these things. People ask for it, or maybe even a website, putting documents somewhere. Yeah. I probably should start doing stuff like that on top of the videos that I do.
Yeah, I do some books. I've done some where I've self-published. I've done some where I've written and that was published by a publisher. I've done even my short stories that I do. If anybody wants to read free short stories, I've got them on PDFs on my website. Just go to books, and then it'll see a link for the short stories. And those are like fictional, but they're not. They're Christian in the sense like there's a Christian theme to it, but it's not like it's just like a fictional story, but it's going to have the Christian theme, prophecy, and stuff going through it, like ghost towns and I don't know. I can't remember the other two that I've written, but yeah, put them together in a PDF. Put all your charts together, man. Get some kind of website together so you can put all your information on it, and then save it. Yeah, people would be fascinated to see your work, and you don't want it to necessarily just get lost in a shelf somewhere or whatever. But I've lost tons of stuff over the years, so I've just started trying to save it, PDFs and etc. Even all my articles, I've done pretty good about going all the way back to 2011, getting all my articles I wrote an article every week for the first 8 years. So I don't even know hundreds of articles now, but I've saved them in the PDFs, and people want to go back and fact check my work years ago, they can go back and fact check it. All that. So it's for me, it was beneficial. I had no intention of starting my own website, but when the Omega letter closed, I ended up having to start my own website. Okay. I'm going to go to, I'm going to go to Allison's question real fast. I'll take this one. It seems to be like more, I mean, you're free to jump in on it if you want to. Allison asked question, do you think a mass death event will coincide with the rapture and possible also aliens showing up too? I tend to think that I look at the Luke 17:26-30, the days of Lot, or the days of Noah, the days of Lot, being like it is right before the Son of Man comes. And it seems like there's a sense of normalcy, buying and selling, planting and sowing, buying and selling, marrying, giving in marriage. There seems like a normalcy to this time period that doesn't exist inside of the 70th week itself. I don't personally think it'll be some kind of mass death event before it. Could there be something in conjunction with it? Absolutely. It could also be definitely something afterward. I think the actual rapture event itself will cause a ton of deaths in the world because planes crashing, cars crashing, people not showing up to work. You may have a doctor working on somebody, then he's gone, and then that person dies on the operating room bed. I mean, any number of scenarios could play out, but I do think that will result in it is going to be a kind of a form of judgment in a way on the Christ rejecting world. It's also going to be a wake up call for a lot of people. And I mean, it's going to be multifaceted in what its purpose is and what it's going to do and what's going to accomplish, aside from just removing the body of Christ, the believers, the church together. And I will say this real fast. If there's a last trump, in my opinion, there has to be a first trump. I look at the first trump as being in Exodus 19, when the whole nation of Israel is gathered at the foot of Mount Sinai for the first time. And then Moses goes up, God comes down to the top of the mountain, and this trumpet blast happens, and everybody's freaking out, and it's like this massive thing. And I think that was the first trumpet. That's it, because for me, context is like the context is they are gathered together for the first time as a body of believers, and then Moses goes up, he's the representative of them, God comes down. Same thing at the rapture. We are going to be gathered together as the first time for Christians for the last 2,000 years. We'll all meet up together in the sky. Christ comes to the sky, he does not come to the earth, and we go back up with him. Now, that aside, that hopefully that answers your question. I don't think it'll happen prior to, I think it'll happen probably in conjunction with. Now, tomorrow World War III could break out. Please don't hold me to this. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't see into the future all the specific things that are going to happen. You could look at the best prophecy teachers in the world. I don't know how many of them predicted 2020. I don't think any of them did, really. The only time that I ever talked about the medical stuff going on in 2020 is because in the Army, I was part of the medical department. I was a medevac pilot. And so when I wasn't in flying positions, it was like in the strategic planning and et cetera, those kinds of jobs. And we had to look at that because that was just part of the mission set that we dealt with, mass casualty events, et cetera. So I personally don't think it is, but I tend to think there's going to be a sense of normalcy prior to it. And then when it happens, that's going to, pardon my language, all hell is going to break loose at that point, literally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what I'll do is this. I'll say one more point here, and then we probably should close it up.
Yeah.
But because you brought up Exodus 19, and I'll show you this little chart here. And so Exodus 19 is the blast of a trumpet. You had said that this is essentially the voice of God, and this happens in the third month, and most people would tie that with Feast of Weeks. Psalm 77 uses that same Hebrew word, kol, the voice of thunder. First Thessalonians is the trumpet of God as well, right? So there's not too many places in the Bible. In fact, I think these are the only places really in the Bible when you see specifically the blast or the voice of God blowing the trumpet. And so that's why this is another reason why I associate the rapture with Feast of Weeks. And Revelation 4:1, when John comes up, because he hears this trumpet, he hears this voice call him up. And a lot of people would agree that Revelation 4:1 is an example of the rapture. And so we see that there. So I think that's just a fun little additional thing. But I'd like to have on the channel, Pete, for maybe in January or something like that. And we had talked about doing that, so we'll schedule it and stuff, and maybe like mid-January or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's close it out here. If I didn't get to your questions tonight, the second Esdras question and then the Pope and the doors and all that, I will definitely address it on either Monday or next week. I know next week's Christmas. I'll be on with Vindog on Monday at 6 p.m. So kind of not my normal time that I'm usually either on around noon or I'm on like later at night, but I'll be on with Vindog on his channel. As soon as we get the link, we'll put it out there. Thank you, Bubba News. If you're on Telegram, please check out TBN News. That's Bubba News. Him and what's his name? Keegan Fernandez. Trying to find all the channels that I follow. Keegan Fernandez, Bubba News, Watchman on the Wall. Amir Sarfati, a lot of information's coming out. John Holler comes out that way on TBN or on Telegram. And then a bunch of stuff lined up for January. So yeah, Aaron, it's been a blast having you on, dude. I love talking to you. Before this, you and I never really interacted personally. I think before yesterday, we never did. I watched some of your stuff. I really liked it, and love to do work with you in the future, anytime, any place, and let's get it done. But
Yeah, let's
thank
get
you
it
guys
done.
for hanging out tonight. Yeah, thank you guys for hanging out tonight. If you want to save this playlist or save the show, save it, bookmark it for whatever. Uh, Thank you guys for hanging out tonight. Thank you, moderators, for gathering the questions. Thank you guys for your time. I know your time is precious, and we very much do appreciate your prayers, support. Let us know how we can pray for you, and keep sending the questions. Send them to me. I can address them. And if there's things for Aaron in the future, you can either go through his channel. It's got a minute, right?
Yep,
God a
it's
minute.
got a minute with a question mark. So that's the channel. And we also got a Discord as well, where there's an awesome community there. We do tons of studies and stuff like that. So we'll have PETA on the channel whenever we line something up. We haven't really officially, talked like this. It's been a blessing for me, brother. And I love your attitude. I love your work. I love that you're logically thinking things through. It's cool. It's cool when we can kind of come together with logic and biblical prophecy and understanding. Because everything God does is going to be decently and in order, and every jot and tittle is going to be fulfilled. And so we both logically like what we're seeing here. We're not just smelling something. So anyway, we'll leave it there. Thanks, brother, for having me, and God bless everybody.
Okay, thank you guys. And I'll get if you want, I'll get your Discord. If anything you want me to put, I'll put on the show notes under this channel or under this program. And that way people can just go directly to that and look at it and be connected to you that way. But yeah, check out Aaron's program. And thank you guys. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again on Monday. So take care. God bless. Maranatha. And we'll talk to you later.